Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special, I don't know, anime zone, gamer zone talk, extra little podcast thing I'm doing based on some of the discourse that's going around with myself, Bestie Boy, best guy ever, and my good friend Mark from the Electric Underground. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Thank you for
Good to be
joining
back
me.
on Topic Zone, Anime Zone, whatever
Indeed,
zone
indeed.
we're in.
Name undetermined at this time, but yeah. So we were talking a little bit, and I was jabbing with some people about the news about the new Evangelion. I guess I don't know, sequel, continuation, whatever. About Yoko Taro was brought on, the guy that made Nier Automata and makes the Nier series and whatnot, Drakengard, etc. And the fact that Eva is going to continue in some form with him making a new project, and this sparked a discourse in which I had some things to say, and a lot of people were commenting on it, letting me know what they thought, and there was a large degree of disagreement here about if this is like good, bad, general media trends. And so you're a fellow Eva fan, although neither of us.
Yes, I am.
I'm delightful, but neither of us are particularly big fans of the rebuilds. I kind of actively dislike them. I think you haven't watched them all, but you've learned some of it. Yeah.
Viscerally dislike.
I
didn't watch them because I remember I turned one on, years ago. I'm a very snap judgment to like these types of things. Because I wasn't reviewing it. I could just personally viewing it, whatever I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not liking this vibe. Get out of here.
And I assume this was the first one in the series of the rebuilds, right?
Yeah, and the reason why is if I really like a series, and I'm not having to review it, okay, so this doesn't apply to my review habits, but if I really like a series and they start doing this kind of stuff like remakes, rebuilds, continuations, spin-offs, as soon as my senses start to pick up that it's not going well, I try to exit immediately to try to save my
your soul?
Like mental picture. Yeah, to save my soul, but also like my respect for the series. It's like I don't want to see Ava like that. I don't want to see what's happening here. So I bounce.
And you know what? We'll talk about this later. I've got a bunch of notes prepared I want to get into here, but like what you're already describing is one of the core issues that I see a lot of people who are kind of excited about, who liked the rebuilds a lot and are happy about like the new Yoko Taro version, and like just what I call like remake culture, which constitutes like remakes, like sequels far later, adding to series after like there was a conclusion,
reboots,
general continuation, reboots, all this stuff I just call like remake culture, even though I know that's not exactly precise, but it's close enough. That a lot of people say like this concept that like, what's the problem? Just ignore those things and just like the stuff that you like. And like in practice, I agree that makes a lot of sense, but I have many arguments, I have many thoughts as to like why that isn't really good enough to just endlessly make whatever you want. It won't affect the original at all, either individually or culturally, because it does. But I want to talk about that later. That we'll come to that in our notes.
I've thought about this quite a bit, Nate,
yeah, sure.
And I think one big difference is some people, I think, are naturally critically minded and are natural critics, and some people are not. And I've really learned over my years of doing my critique, interacting with people, that it's hard for us to actually relate to each other because it's such a distinctive, different relationship you have with media, where like, as I'm watching something, my brain is like actively in process, like criticizing it as it's happening. And that's with certain art forms, not all art forms, but I've noticed like in other areas of my life, I go to a restaurant, I go to McDonald's, I eat some shitty sandwich. I'm happy. I'm just like happy as a clam. Like this instinct doesn't translate to every aspect of my life.
Right.
But with certain particular mediums, it does. So games, film, literature, not as much music, but especially games, film, literature. It really kicks in.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing is interesting that maybe people don't consider is that if you're critically minded, you can't. It's not a question of choosing. It's that you can't. You can't turn this off.
Right.
You can't just consume things because everyone else is consuming it. It's like, sitting in church, everyone has faith and you have no faith. And everyone's like, well, why don't you just have faith? Well, I don't have it. I don't know how to, I can't just gain faith. It has to happen somehow, I guess. I feel like that's a very similar issue I run into when discussing these types of discussions, is because
you're totally right. You're totally right.
Yeah, we don't experience art the same way. So it's just like, to them, it seems like,
You
Why
seem
do
like
you
a
have
hater.
to criticize?
You seem like an angry incel chud.
Exactly.
Is what they
Exactly.
say.
Right. But I've been thinking about this a lot. This has always been how I've interacted with art. Before I was online, before I would walk out of a movie theater and like need to talk about what we just saw.
Right.
And all my friends would be like, oh yeah, that was, fine, whatever. But I'm like, no, listen. The scene, like I'm breaking down Spider-Man 1 to them.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, this, that kind it's I think it is a part of your temperament to some degree that you cannot get rid of.
Speaking of like remakes, and like yesterday I saw the relatively new Dracula movie, and like obviously there's been 1,000 Dracula. I saw the Nosferatu one from and as soon as that came out, I'm like, okay, I like this. I have these critiques about the plot line. And look, a lot of those are subjective. But like I am certainly not of the person that was just like, I had a generally positive experience, even though I did have a generally positive experience. That movie was quite good. But I cannot help myself. And let me just say right now, I wish to offer an olive branch, because like I hope people get this from me on Twitter. I bear no ill will to the people that like disagree with me on this stuff. I think I pat myself on the back a little bit. I engage very cordially, generally, with people on this stuff. Maybe too much so. And people think I'm being I don't know, whatever, disingenuous or something. But this really is a difference. I was talking to, shout out to this guy, the Weeb Crew, who I was talking to on Twitter, had like a long back and forth on that was substantive. And my final post, sort of talking to him, was that ultimately we do have a difference of values here, which comes down to like, what is your priority? Do you have a more protectionist mindset of like the media that you've judged to be artistically valuable and that maybe you have like some personal connection with, blah, 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 all that stuff, not all of which is like objectively good. Some of it is obviously subjective and personal and whatever, versus sort of the other way of viewing art or whatever, is that you're like, I want as much of this as I can get. And if some of it is imperfect, that's okay, because there's just more of it and there's bound to be something good in there. But hopefully, like, as much of it as good as possible. That's the side. But these two views are in fundamental opposition, and they will not agree on everything. It comes from a precursor view of the way media is made, etc. And I mean, like Eva, like Final Fantasy VII, fucking the remakes, etc. Like all these things that touch on this subject. This is where the divide comes in, and it manifests in 1,000 billion different like off-shooting details off of that core disagreement.
Yeah, and I feel like part of it is also like a different way of connecting between a kind of like critique, as you're trying to extract something, an aesthetic value set from the media that you consume and watch and stuff. Like that's something that I do a lot, is I watch Ava and I'm saying, okay, I'm connecting with this. Why? What about this is connecting with me?
Right.
Not what about this is connecting with the Ava fans out there. Not what is connecting with the internet generally, but what is about this particularly aesthetically that I'm connecting with. And then I take from that, okay, this is the aesthetic value set that I have, and Ava is lining up on these areas here. But some other people may watch Ava and connect with it for a completely different reason that has nothing to do with my value set, and then they end up having their own, like, oh no, my favorite part of Ava was this. And so what happens is, if a series has a finite identity that's fixed, we actually can have harmony between all these different people because we all share this one experience. This is Ava, this is it, and we all like it for different reasons, but that's that. But the problem with the remake culture, and why remakes tend to be so divisive, and why remakes tend to have all of these like battles between the fan bases, is because it's the creator, the IP holder, whoever, coming and saying, actually, this is the value of Ava.
Right.
This is what Ava is. Not what was there before, this. And it's basically impossible to remake something or redo something without shifting the emphasis, the tone, the aesthetic in some way.
So true.
And I've noticed with the rebuilds, it feels to me much more of like a standard anime. Like, oh, okay, this is like
I agree.
Any other anime that you'll see, And I almost wonder, just based off of the comments that Ano has made about the original series versus the rebuilds, is that I almost wonder if, now I'm projecting, okay, but this is kind of fun to speculate. I almost wonder if he's a little embarrassed about the original series.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. We can certainly talk at great length about like Anno's feelings making End of Evangelion and the end of the original. Yeah, there's lots to say there.
Yeah. Yes, because I feel like just armchair here that maybe he felt that the original Eva was too personal. It was too open. He was being too human when he made that.
And for the record, you're something of an Eva super fan. That's fair to say, correct?
The original series.
Right,
and
of course.
And end of Eva. Yes,
of course, okay. Just to clarify for everybody that doesn't know, Mark, you're the video game guy, but you have a big thing for Eva.
It's definitely my favorite anime.
Okay, great.
Well,
there you go.
it and, Macross, they're really up there.
Sure,
But those two. But for similar reasons, but, my favorite thing about Eva, especially, and End of Eva really brings us home, is like, it's un-anime sort of acceptance of really uncomfortable feelings, really uncomfortable social expression, that the grimness, the sort of fatalism of it.
Yeah.
That is so rare to get in anime, at least from what I've seen, right?
I was watching some like slice of life anime today that I was like, this is not real life, but it's very comfy, and sometimes you want that. So but End of Eva is the opposite of that completely.
That's right. And so when I was watching the rebuilds and I like sensed that these elements were being trimmed back and pulled back, I was like, no, no. Because to me, I'm not the kind of guy that I sit around and like, but what about the plot? What about the lore? What I really like is aesthetic expression, tone, all of those like more human expressive elements, and that's really hard to get in anime sometimes. And when I see it in anime, I'm always like, oh mama, I really like that. That's one of that always connects me the most. And so I almost wonder though, just his comments about Eva, if he felt he was, because it was this explosion of popularity and like everyone's like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I'm sure if you're like insecure and you're like, oh shit, I said way too much about myself in the original series. I was like way too out there. Well, let's pull that back a bit.
Maybe it's
I feel
worth
like that's
discussing
kind of
that a little bit now.
Rebuild.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you might know all this already. Look, for the record, I have seen Rebuilds movie 1 and 2. I did not like the end of. I didn't like 1 very much, and then I didn't like, and I was like, that's enough. I've had enough. I'm not interested. And like maybe one day I'll go watch the rest of them. I don't know. That's not the point of this talk right now. We're talking about art in general, with Eva being the jumping off point. But so when Anno, like what you're kind of describing here is that you have a personal value as a fan of Eva, of End of Evangelion in particular, that may well be totally at odds with Anno's current feelings about his own series, which, by the way, kind of happens like all the time with artists.
All the time. Yeah. This is another example, just throwing it's outside of anime, is A Clockwork Orange. The writer of A Clockwork Orange spent the rest of his life like struggling against his own work. Like he couldn't accept. It's like, he went back and forth with it. He got mad at Stanley Kubrick because Kubrick made the film, and Kubrick's like, no, the awesome version of the book, that's the film. That's the legacy. And he couldn't handle it, and he went back and forth, and he felt guilty about it, and so he can never.
Guilt, I think, is an important part of how Anno feels. Yeah. Let's discuss that very briefly, because I think Anno. So obviously, everybody knows the story, but just in brief, when Anno finished Evangelion with Gainax, like they were running out of budget, whatever it was. Again, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all folktale stuff, but my understanding is they were running out of budget, and the last 2 episodes were slapped together, basically. Now, they're artistic, borderline, like, fantastic works of art, but, like, they very clearly are not, like, the original vision that was intended. They were, they're, concepts that were put together. It's, like, unfinished. It's beautiful, and, like, everyone has learned to appreciate it. But I will say this. I watched the show very recently, like within the last year. Loved it, of course. Loved the movie. Those final 2 episodes are absolutely unfinished, and they do not wrap up the story in a satisfying way. Like, if you care about sort of the in-world lore. Like, what happens to Asuka? It really is not clarified in those last 2 episodes, and people want to know. Even Shinji's fate is ambiguous, sort of. Yeah.
Here's a really interesting, because I think about this all the time outside of Eva as well, and I feel like just a scenario. Here's a really interesting scenario, because I think time, we never talk about this, time is such an important aspect to these discussions, because let's say there was no End of Evangelion, and the series ended, right? The series ends, and it ends in Clearly, it's like
it ends on that unfinished note. Yeah.
It ended in this unfinished state, right? And then let's say, here's an interesting scenario. Like Ava wasn't this massive hit. It wasn't this cultural phenomenon that people were like banging on his door. Finish it now.
Right.
Let's say instead, it slowly over time kind of had a cult fan base, and everyone's like, oh yeah, but it's like a smaller group, and then the fan base builds over time, and then a decade later, like much later, maybe even more than a decade, much later. There is no end of Evangelion, and instead we just get Rebuild.
Right.
So there's no end. It's the original series and then to Rebuild. I would still say, because of these things of like the aesthetic choices, the tone, the creative expression, I would still say I would prefer to have the original ending as unfinished as it is than to have whatever Rebuild ending there is, even if it technically wraps up the story points.
Well,
even if it technically tells you.
Like, it's not that the rebuilds, as you're describing in this scenario, are intended to like finish the story Anno always wanted to finish. That's not what the rebuilds are. The rebuilds are a new telling of the story with multiple different like goals and intentions. Many of them being making money for the studio, which we can talk about like later on, because that's
we'll talk about
a big part of the story. But so, I mean, you're totally right. So it's not that like, look, I'm sympathetic.
I remember,
here's a story, just real quick. The Metalocalypse story was an unfinished story for many years, and then they finally, like a decade or so later, made the final movie. And so, like, that's different. That's wrapping up a story that was meant to be finished. It just got canceled. That's not the... But first of all, even then, they might fuck it up. There's a million ways they could fuck it up, even by doing that. So I'm not particularly defensive of that necessarily either. And ultimately, I'll get to my point that what matters ultimately is that, like, the spirit is of the right mind to deliver, like, a satisfying conclusion or continuation. It's kind of all bets are off if just all the right people are working on the project to make something good that is like in the right spirit and will satisfy the fans of whatever it is. But there's just a billion ways to fuck that up. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go on.
Oh, I was saying, I kind of had a really unique experience with the end of Evangelion. Sorry, the conclusion of the original series. Not the end of Evangelion. I had a really unique experience with the conclusion of the original series because I wasn't on forums and so forth. I wasn't in the conversation of the Ava series. So I watched it essentially blind.
Sure.
And so when I got to those last episodes, and I'm wondering if this is something that if you took away the internet, if you took away people's priming, I completely accepted that ending. I was like, whoa. My thought was like, this is getting really impressionistic. This is getting really surreal. But since the tone of the entire... Like, if this was a standard show, right? Like, if Dragon Ball Z did that, you'd be like,
hey,
well, something went wrong.
That'd be pretty weird.
Something went wrong with Dragon Ball Z. But because Ava, throughout the run, is playing with these surreal elements, is playing with these, like, off-kilter tones and this, like, psychological type of horror thing happening, because it was playing with all of those elements, by the time you actually hit the end of the series and encounter the production issues, I feel like... Now, he's shown his hand, so we know that's what it was. But if he never showed his hand, it would be plausible to some degree of him saying, no, this was an artistic choice. I wanted to show like the breaking down of the mental state of the characters in the actual aesthetic of the actual drawings themselves breaking down and these types of things.
It's not impossible to imagine that. Yeah.
So I feel like... I'm fond of the original conclusion, even though I like End of Evangelion.
Everybody
a lot.
loves the congratulations scene. It's legendary, of course.
Yes, I am fond of it for sure. I am fond of it.
Well, okay.
And I don't need story points completely wrapped up either. I do like ambiguous endings. I do like No Country for Old Men and Black Swan and these types of things where you're like, okay. Well,
yeah, of course, an ambiguous ending can be satisfying. Especially, like, classic example is like Inception doesn't tell you at the end if it's a dream, but like that's the whole point of the story. If you don't know if it's a dream or not, so like, of course,
Blade Runner as well. I do have to say, I feel a little like Inception was a little too on the nose with the Blade Runner.
That's why I use it as an example because it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's like it's a little too like okay. Come on, man.
Yeah. Okay, but so to all of this, let's just circle back though, because like this discussion about accepting the ending or not is like, so Anno's mental state. I mean, we can talk about like 1,000 things about this, and like I do want to discuss like art generally, but since Eva is the jumping off point here, let's just return for a moment to like Anno's mental state when completing the original story, which you mentioned before. So Anno finishes the last 2 episodes, etc., and famously the fans riot. The fans are deeply upset by this. They get letters sent to Gynax. They get like death threats to Anno is like the thing they always say. Again, like I'm not an expert. Is that a rumor? Is that true? I believe it's true.
Well, apparently,
but, yeah.
Because I know, I am also a Dragon Ball Z fan.
Yeah.
Apparently, anime fans of that era just love sending death threats to anime creators.
Just like me,
over
for real.
the most, because for the most innocuous things, it sounds like, Tori, different people will get death threats from the fans. Sure. It's like, okay.
They were wildin' in that period, I suppose. But
Japan's not like a super violent country either, right? So
not super violent, though they do have their bursts of super violence with like individuals, like the certain gas attacks, and I mean that, like, what the hell was that about?
I know about that.
Just like crazy cultist guys or whatever. So I mean, it does happen sometimes. It is a possibility, and of course, I mean, famously, tragically, Kyoto Animation had like one of their buildings set on fire and like killed a bunch of their staff because like that was like a crazy guy that thought they were stealing his. Look, I don't know the truth claims there, but like disproportionate violence was enacted for the claim that was made. So like, yeah. Obviously, sometimes death threats are scary. Maybe it was real, maybe it's not. Neither here nor there for this discussion. The point is that it put Anno in an extremely bad mood. He was very depressed and upset. And after, like, the episodes come out, it's soon after the show finishes. Everyone's upset about the show not finishing the way they wanted it to. And like, admittedly, we 100% know that wasn't what was like originally intended. And like, End of Evangelion is closer to what was intended, though. Obviously, so and then the legend seems to be true, that like Anno was in such a bad fucking mood because everybody was bumming him out and getting on his ass about the original ending of the show, that he's like, fuck all of you, I'm going to make this like depressing as shit and make it like a real downer, which,
yes, I love it.
I recently watched the whole show into the movie, and the tonal shift is extremely clear. It absolutely I feel it is a massive tonal change from even the like weird schizo last 2 episodes or whatever. The show is never even close, in my opinion, to as depressing as the movie is from like the first frame of the movie. It absolutely changed tones. So
that's what I'm saying about the aesthetic values, because
sure
in Mark's life, in my life of media revisionism, media aesthetic changes, you know how rare an End of Eva type of shift is? You never see these.
Sure.
So the fact that he's like, you know what? Let's double down and go crazy with it. I'm the guy that was like, yes, this is what I want to see. Yeah. This is what I wanted. This is the ending I'm looking for here.
And they call it like his this is somewhat of a rumor, whatever. They call it like revenge against the fans because he's so pissed that like,
legend.
I'm killing Misato, fuck you. I
love it.
Etc.
I love it.
And so that's the ending we got, and it's like one of the most legendary and objectively awesome anime pieces of production general of all time. No doubt about it.
Of all time. Every time you want to invoke something like epic on YouTube, you use End of Eva. You use End of Eva, man. I've done it myself. It's just so aesthetically amazing and so evocative and powerful that I love End of Evangelion. So,
and I think many would agree. I certainly do too. And so this leaves us at a point where like we deeply love, resonate, get so much artistic value out of the original version of the story. And I know, look, someone could be like, End of Eva is like already a remake. Okay, not really. That's not really the case. It's like sort of the true ending, whatever. It's not the same thing. So then we're left with like,
I think the key here though, because when the thing about remakes is funny is like, I feel like sometimes it's useful to use it as a really broad term because people will try to disguise a remake under some fancy name or whatever.
Perhaps a rebuild, we could call it, for instance.
Yeah, a rebuild, a reimagination, a reboot, all these types of things. But at the same time, I've also learned, dealing with a lot of criticism and critique of remakes it is also important to understand like what's happening underneath the idea, the concept. And so I would argue that the fact that he was like, you know what, fuck all of you, you bunch of bitches, I'm gonna give you exactly what I want to see happen, and you can suck it. The fact that he did that, I think, puts it in a very special category, away from 99.9% of remakes, rebuilds, revisits, where the original creator's like, what do you want? Tell me what you want? Okay. It's all of that like product, you want this? I'll give you that. Fan service stuff. It is so rare to see an artist be like, no, this is the vision. I don't care if it causes problems. This is the vision. I really respect that. I think it's much stronger of an artistic. It's a much stronger of an artistic place to come from than to come from a place of, okay, people criticized my stuff and I want everyone to like me, so here you go.
And that's
now
why
like
the greatest artistic masterpiece of the last decade is obviously Joker 2 by Todd Phillips, which said, fuck you fans, I'm raping the Joker. And then they did. All right, whatever. Just funny aside.
Yeah, that's the thing is, because Joker 2 is really interesting.
Yeah,
it is
interesting.
Like the concept, the energy. Okay, but the thing, we can't forget that End of Ava is actually amazingly aesthetically accomplished.
Yes,
whereas Joker
everyone
2
loves
is
it
not.
for a reason.
So the difference is, I'd say, it's Joker 2. I like the energy. I like the energy.
Yeah, I guess. I
but
don't
you
know.
actually need to land the plane here.
Right,
you need to actually make it aesthetically good so that I can be like, see? Because if you have the energy, but then you don't land it, now it's just embarrassing. And then you end up reinforcing everyone else who said, oh, you should have just given fans exactly what they wanted. So
right. I just think that gets
danger.
to the salient
You got to
point.
land the plane.
Right. It's a multifactorial point about how there's multiple things that can go wrong when you mess with like continuing a story that, let's just say, that people loved. Like, a lot of people connected with the Joker one. A lot of people loved Eva, obviously. And so, like, you can do versions of saying fuck you to the fans that go really well, or you can do it badly. And the point that really I want to make is that, like, it's kind of complicated. It's not as simple as just doing one thing. Yeah.
I'm really excited about this point, so sorry to
Sure, no, go ahead.
to belabor it. But I really like this point a lot because I think about it a ton. Just that I think there is a difference, is that the end of Evangelion, I would argue, Anu knew what made the series special. And even though the fans may not fully accept all of it, he understands, no, this is what's special about this series. And even though you're not prepared for it, I'm going to hammer you with it. Versus, I would say, in the case of Joker 2, Todd Phillips had no idea why people like Joker 1 that much.
Right,
like,
right, very clear.
Or he just
didn't
like kind of took a lot from Taxi Driver and all these, Scorsese movies. I guess I'll try the, so the difference is that Anno knew what he was doing,
right?
Like, aesthetically, as an artist, where Phillips was just swinging. He was swinging in the air, and he didn't know what he was going to hit.
I just to clarify your point, because I agree with you. I think that it's like Anno, he wanted to tell the story that sort of was intended and would satisfy the fans. I mean, I always point to like killing Misato as the biggest like fuck you, because sure, it makes sense people die in like war, like the final battle against the 18th angel, the Lilim, aka humans, the most evil angel of all. It makes sense that could happen, but like it didn't have to be like that cruel or that fucked up and all this other stuff. But so he's telling a satisfying story. And by the way, I will always defend to my dying day that End of Evangelion, it is depressing in like the atmosphere and a lot of what happens. It ends on an absolutely hopeful message. 100%, it is saying that there is hope. And by the way, it's not even unclear. It says it in black and fucking white. It says it super clearly. It's not even hard to understand. I know a lot's going on in the movie, but it's just like humanity can come back if it chooses to do so. It ends on a hopeful note. Yes, Shinji choking out Asuka. Like, that's a dark motif that's happening there. But how does it end? Asuka forgives him. He like feels shame for what he's done, and they resolve to do better. And by the way, I mean, it's so artistically beautiful that the cover of End of Evangelion is actually like after the end point of the story. I mean, it's just fucking brilliant, of Shinji and Asuka standing there after the movie ends being like, what do we do now? Because there is hope. It's literally stated that there is hope. So none of this. The thing is, Anno thinks it's all depressing and fucked up and stuff about the story he told. It bums everybody out. I think he's fucking wrong. I think he is goddamn wrong about his own story. And everyone's like, we gotta tell the story about how growing up and getting an office job in your 30s is like the most important thing that could happen. That. We'll get into this, all right? Because I have not watched that movie. I've just heard people talk about it a lot. But yeah, go on, Mark.
Also, too, artists are it's really hard as an artist to know your own story fully.
Right.
And like, especially when it comes to interpretation and like if someone tells you, Nate, you're being extremely negative. You're being extremely negative. You're being really negative. It's hard, at least for me, it's hard for me to be like, even though I don't feel like I'm being that way, it's hard for me to be like, I am absolutely not.
Well,
I'm 100%
and by the way,
not,
when you're making something for the public,
you start to doubt yourself.
For the public, there will be some people that feel that way. And that's like, so do you take them as like the audience you care most about? What if 99% of people like get it, 1% of people don't get it and hate it? Which of those audiences do you choose to serve in like what you do beyond that? I mean, these are the kind of questions you have to think about. Not that the raw numbers even should determine what you do. Like, if you make a masterpiece and 99% of people are too stupid to get it, it's not actually necessarily a good thing to serve them. I mean, there's debate about like what your art should be intended to do, obviously, but like, yeah, it's complicated, kind of.
Well, I would say it's definitely to express aesthetically at that moment what you're trying to express. That's what it's going for, and that's what he wanted to express. Whether or not people like it or love it, hate it, that's like you said, that's beside the point. The point is like, is it aesthetically accomplished? Yes. Did it express what he wants to express? Yes. Now, later on in his life, and we run into this all the time, this isn't just Anno. Later on in his life, he looks back at his younger self and he's like, that was a little cringe. I was cringe back then. Now I'm cool and like all together. So let's see, let's revise that a little bit. Even as a YouTuber, sometimes you're like, why was I so fired up? But it's like, that's how I felt then. That's how I felt then, and that's how it is.
Absolutely. and so you're saying, like, in the conversation of, like, what should art be for? Like, first of all, everyone's going to have their own view of sort of what any specific story is intended for and what art generally is meant to do. But, so one thing that it's meant to do, for sure, is to express... you like express your true self, express an artistic vision that I mean, if you want to ask me, I think that like this was what sort of my tweet was about. It's like I was making fun of it, but my point is that like art really, I think in its ideal form is meant to encapsulate ideas and depict them in like an aesthetically coherent way for the sake of conveying a message to posterity. And that posterity part is very important because it means it like lasts beyond just the moment. It's meant to be
very,
like,
very important. I agree.
For sure.
I agree completely.
Especially and we'll talk about the capitalism question a little bit later, but there are other factors involved in making like art and stuff, one of which is to make money, because we do live in a capitalist system where someone has to pay for it to get made. We're not living in Star Trek land where everything's free forever. So you have to make money. And the other factor that's super important here that I'll talk about later is when you make a given piece of art, you've got the money, you've got the time, great, no problem, right? No, there's someone you forgot to ask. I consent. Nate does not consent because of the opportunity cost about all the other art that you could be making that you've been contracted to make. Let's just say that you're like an artist and a big company hires you to make a stupid sequel that nobody cares about, including you, but they're going to pay you a lot. And maybe you even like it, but you had this other project that you're like, look, that would have been like what my heart was dead set on making, but like, I guess I'll put that aside to do this other thing. Cause like everybody wants it, right? So I'm saying that also matters. It doesn't determine everything all the time, but it is an important part of the discussion. So,
it does matter a lot, especially because art is such a complex, interwoven thing that it's not just that you sit down and you're like, and now I create art.
Right.
Like you are, the circumstance you're in, where you're placing yourself really informs what you're doing. And so if you're placing yourself as an artist in let's say sellout type of work that you don't believe in.
Yeah.
It's not just that it harms the time, it also harms the environment you're in, the space, the creative space you could have been in otherwise.
It can, certainly.
It's
certainly
very important. It's very important.
Now, sometimes the stars align and you're like, I don't know, we'll take an example like Terminator 2. Almost everybody thinks that Terminator 2 is a better movie than Terminator 1. And it's a sequel that was sort of a cash in on like on a popular, series. Not that Terminator is like the most artistically brilliant thing, but it does have cool ideas. The time loop stuff, the time travel, like sending a futuristic soldier back to the past. I don't know if it was the first one to tell that story, obviously, but like it made it a very popular thing. But then Terminator 2 has these things of like, I don't know, parental responsibility, the ideas of like a robot sort of developing sentience to, like, I mean, not exactly, but like protecting humans from like the evils of whatever. A lot of cool stuff that everybody loves, everybody resonates with, and they love like Sarah Connor and in Terminator 2. So I would never say that all products of remake culture are bad. I would not say that is not my thesis. My sort of thesis is that remake culture, I would say, has done more harm than good. And I would then go on to point out all the specific ways that we've like lost out on, and it's not helping us, and blah, blah, blah. And is it capitalism's fault? Is it lack of artistic integrity fault? Are we all just stupider? Do we have worse life experiences than like the people like Tezuka, Osamu Tezuka, that like invented anime, was like a doctor and then went on to be a mangaka, and like they made anime of that, whatever. And so like that shit, he made Blackjack about being a doctor and all kinds of, he shaped the whole landscape, big deal, obviously. Then you got Anno, like a generation or two later, that's like an otaku from when he was born. And so he spends a lot of stories talking about how he's fucking depressed, and, or at least his most famous one, right? Evangelion. And, but he's an otaku to his core. He spends his days now making like remakes of things he loved when he was like 10. Like Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider and all this stuff. And those things are cool. I bet Anno's having a great time doing those. And I don't have the right or the authority to say, Anno, you're wasting your time making those things. But I'll say this, though. When it comes to the Anno question, Anno's fourth movie, the fourth rebuild, 3.0 plus 1.0, fuck off, Anno, whatever. Thrice Upon a Time, whatever the fuck, because there's like 3 versions of the story, whatever. Anno be like, hey, be a normie and have a real life and get married and reproduce. Thank you, Anno, Abe. Thank you, Abe, for telling me this message. So norminess is next to godliness, is Anno's point, is my understanding. I have not watched this movie. That's what I've been told at the end of the movie. Everybody tells me that this is what the movie's about. Okay, fine, I believe you. That's kind of like a good message that I can resonate with. But Anno's real life, he is remaking properties from when he was a child. And like, I've watched like all of the Shin movies, Kamen Rider, Ultraman, whatever. I liked them, but like this is not what he will be remembered for in the grand scheme of things. He will be remembered for Evangelion, the original, that is, End of Evangelion specifically, the thing that he like is kind of embarrassed about. So like, is it really worth spending the energy endlessly running away from and trying to retell the story? You know what? Let me take a pause there. I've said quite a few things there. Mark, care to jump in on any of that?
I was listening. I was enjoying that.
Okay, well, good. Yeah. I've got endless notes here about stuff I can say. We're getting a little out of order for what I want to talk about, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. This is all useful stuff. When I was on Twitter, sort of talking to people, Twitter sucks, and you can only have like short-form conversations.
Twitter sucks massively.
You're typing out, and like even as I'm talking to like the Weeb crew, who made like a good point that I liked, I wanted to debate with, or rather just to discuss with, even though we do disagree on some things. It's like I have like 1,000 points I want to make about all these responses, but like I'm already going on for so long about this. But my point is that talking about it in audio form like this is much more useful, is much easier to do. So anyway, so here we are doing that. Okay, Mark, I have other points to make, but like, do you want to mention anything about what I just said? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So the interesting thing, I find it very interesting that what he's doing now is he's spending his time remaking shows from his childhood.
Right.
And a point that a video game YouTuber made about remakes, Blader, he was talking about why people like remakes. And this is something that I have always struggled to understand. Just like I said before, it's like when you sit in church and everyone has faith and you don't have faith.
Right.
Why don't you have faith? You can't actually describe why that is. You just don't have it.
Right.
Same thing with like remakes. Like, I remember when I first criticized Resident Evil 4 remake.
That's where I found you from. I remember.
Yes, it's kind of my watershed moment into the public consciousness. The funny thing is when I was talking about that, to me, this was completely obvious. To me, this was completely natural. I actually assumed 98% of people would agree with me. I assumed the world around me be like, I mean, come on, seriously, this is Resident Evil 4. Yeah, exactly. And I think so I've always struggled to understand, why do people connect with remakes? Because I have this visceral reaction to them. Like I said, I can't get through these rebuilds without like looking through my eyes and being like, you know,
one
like
word, that word is slop. Pile on the slop, baby. Give me more. But I'm sorry.
And Blader made an amazing point, which is that a lot of people really like remakes, not because they're that interested in the artistic, you know, discussion of it all, but because it becomes a social event.
Correct.
It becomes a social experience. And thinking of Anno, right?
Which, to be fair, much of media is, even originals, but yeah, it certainly is.
Right. And so it makes complete sense to me, actually, that he's spending his time now like recapturing his childhood. Like, okay, I'm now grown, and I am now, like you said, you know, he's a proper, you know,
proper adult. He's married,
proper, and all that.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to recapture that childhood. I'm going to revisit that childhood and reclaim that childhood. And so much of this remake culture comes back to this time and time again. It's like this social, I think I talked about it in the first episode I came on, like, especially millennials, we're stuck in this childhood, like, regurgitation of, like, we need to re-experience our childhood over and over and over in as many forms and shapes as we can. And I think that
I don't begrudge him for.
Stuff.
It seems normal to love your childhood and to love the things of your childhood. But, you know.
Yes, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing about that is that also makes sense why the rebuilds are like the Disney version of Evangelion, right? Because if it's coming from a place of like trying to make the past something pleasant and something recaptured. You notice this with remakes over and over again. Have there been any remakes where you're like, whoa, they went nuts? This is like,
well, can I mention the one that everybody always mentions is Resident Evil 1, I think. That got like a remake that everybody loved. But that was made like a handful of years later, or
that was made by the original director.
Right, which is very, like, if you could do that, it's like, let's say 5 years later, original director, and the goal is to just like to recapture what they were not able to do originally, we can have that conversation. That's a unique circumstance.
Yes, and I also think the motivation behind the original Resident Evil 1 remake is very distinct and not something we'd experience, which is, now this is my speculation because I'll dig into it someday, but I think it was because Resi 4 and the new Resident Evils were going to be on the GameCube and like getting the tech ready for that. I think because you'll see this with some of the early remakes, is it's much more of a question of like, okay, we need to get an engine going on this new hardware. We need to get this going, right? So let's start by like remaking a game we already know, and we can like update it a little bit. But it was actually much more of like to prepare, because it would be one thing if Mikami made Resident Evil 1 and then just kept making Resident Evil 1. That'd be cringe. But you know what he did? He made Resident Evil 1 remake, and then boom, Resi 4, baby.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So
Good
it's
point.
it's such a different place than years later looking back and trying to recapture. And doing a little research here, it does look like Mikami did say that he felt the GameCube would allow the team to bring the original vision of the first Resident Evil more into fruition than they were able to on the PS1, which I think is pretty similar to the end of Evangelion. So I think there is a cool overlap between the two projects. Like, that's what I'm saying about, like, where do these remakes come from? What specifically is informing them? What specifically is the motivation behind them is really important to assess.
And let me mention one contemporary example, which, look, I can't do it today. I can't do it, but very briefly, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I will not be going on an hours-long rant about this. Not today.
The people want it, Nate.
One day,
want it.
One day, I know that they crave it, they need it. I will deliver upon this one day. You will get it.
Okay, good. Because in my room, I have a tally, and I just day by day, I'm like, days.
How many days since Nate didn't make his remake video? One day soon. Okay, but all I'm going to leave it out with is that, generally speaking, those games are generally well received. Look, there's debate about like, did they hit the sales figures exactly they wanted? Some of that might just be like the AAA landscape, which I have many criticisms of, but we won't get into that. And I'll just say, but there's lots to say about them. I have big problems with them, and there is a subset of fans that is like, I mean, they're not true remakes, which even though it's called a remake, okay, blah blah blah, whatever, but it's not a remake. It's like a sequel, kind of remaster, kind of thing, just like the Evangelion, rebuilds, whatever they're called. And so there is much criticism. One can talk about that, but I'm not going to go into a whole long thing about that. So another day we'll talk about that. But so that's one that's like, those have sold generally pretty well. And for me, this is like the number one example of like the opportunity cost. Yes, it makes money. It's recognizable stuff. But like, we could have had Final Fantasy 17, 18, 19 or something if we didn't make these games instead with other stories. And again, a lot of this does get tied up in the conversation of like AAA game expectations and how the ethos behind, and I know this was true of FF7 at the time, but it was just simpler to make games back then. It was less, financially burdensome. There's just a thing that like, well, we're making it in 3D. The other original was 3D, but like, you know what I mean? You can turn around the camera,
we're
HD
making
world.
Everyone's super hot.
We're making it super juiced
hot.
up and stuff. That comes with lots of baggage. And by the way, it comes with filling in a lot of information that you have no choice but to add by designing the game that way that was not present in the original. And as Mark so eloquently said previously, the people that are making that game have different things they like, different things they want versus like the people that played the game at the time. It is inevitable that fandom fractures along those lines, whatever they happen to be. Maybe the game would be made exactly the way I want it, and that would disappoint someone else. Entirely possible. Yeah. Entirely, it's theoretically possible. But okay, so that is to just say that's an example. That? Yeah,
because I've talked about this a lot with like Bog and stuff about like, why don't we see like remakes that go along more of our aesthetic values, more of our like artistic values? And what would happen is a lot of the time, if they shared, like if they were like, okay, I have these real deep artistic values like Nate does, what would happen is as they're planning it out, they'd be like, this isn't going to work. This is not working. Thus the remake would not be made.
Well, like the claim is always that the one-to-one remake just wouldn't sell, which one dispute. I could easily dispute that, but like, that's the argument.
Yeah, but even outside of that, because if they're saying, okay, we're pushing for as authentically capturing the original as possible, the more they push along those lines, the more they realize everything we do gets further from that goal.
Right.
And no matter what we try, we will just continue to get further away from the goal.
Let me just grant the premise. Let me grant the premise that like, okay, so a huge part of this is marketing with like something like FF7 Remake or whatever. It's just the goal. So it's kind of marketed as a remake. Again, I have kind of moral problems with the way they marketed that game, but like it's called a remake. They're like, we're retelling the story, but also it's like a sequel or whatever, just like the Shin Evangelion type stuff, which you kind of have to watch to figure out, because they don't make it super obvious at first, though now everybody kind of knows. And there is a question that like, doesn't it stir more conversation to have new plot elements happen that did not happen in the original? And the answer is like, yes, that does stir more discourse and stuff. But then it's like, okay, but is this actually like a worthwhile conversation to have about the story? And that gets into all the actual like artistic integrity. What's the point of the story?
It's almost like the more you think about it, the more you realize it is a fundamental compromise artistically.
And that leads me to the conclusion
getting
that, like,
around it. You cannot find a way around this conclusion.
And that's why the ultimate conclusion that someone could come to is that, well, if that's how it is, maybe the remake doesn't work. And it's like, yes, we've arrived at the conclusion. That's correct, folks. Remakes like this just don't work. And I know they work financially. I know they work to get people talking and to get that all works on that. But when it comes to artistic compromise, it will be there, and there's gonna be problems, and you're gonna get people like me screeching about it for years. So like, it comes with the territory. You chose to do it. This is what you signed up for. So that's it. All comes as a package deal.
Also too, because here's something really interesting that I think you guys might find fascinating, is that people like ourselves that criticize these remakes and so forth,
incel autists. Yep, that's me.
Well, I would say actually no, critics.
Yeah,
like that is actually, but that is actually the role of a critic. If you step away from all of how people ingest critique now and just talk about what function does a critic serve in the artistic landscape? It is actually, when people ask about canon, what's canon? What creates canon? If you look at where that comes from, critics create canon, not the writers, not the audience. Critics are the ones who decide this is the canon. So that is actually the function of a critic. So one thing I've always wondered is if it's like, why are you as a critic bringing these topics up? It's like, this is my responsibility. This is what I have to do.
Well,
otherwise,
it's
what am I even engaging in?
It's all we can do. And, that's interesting because that immediately reminds me of like a topic I was going to get to later. But it's so that seems to intersect directly with like the one example of like a series very deeply warped that I'm familiar with by like continuations and stuff, and what you could generously call remake culture, but it's really like sequels and all that stuff, is Star Trek. Which there may be a tweak video coming on very soon, guys. Be excited about that. But the point is that that story has clear eras when it existed, and the what is it? What would you call it? The morals, the stories that are told, are deeply reflect the era in which they were made, and personally, I just reject everything that was made after Enterprise. I'm like, that is not in fact Star. I do not care. It is something else.
And that, I would say, as a critic, you doing that is you doing your responsibility. Like, if you are a critic and what are you offering? I'm not talking about your personality and why people like you or anything. I'm saying, what are you offering? If you come to the table and say, I'm a critic who accepts everything, everything's great, you might as well not exist. You have no purpose whereas if you come in and say, I would do this with Ava, so I feel very comfortable.
Sure.
End of Evangelion, boom. That's the line. Mark's canon, original series, end of Evangelion. That's the canon of Ava by my aesthetic values. And then the thing is like critics, they create canons, but there's not one canon. So then another critic could come in and say, actually, the rebuilds are the true version of Ava.
Sure.
And this is why. And then the two critical canons compete with each other,
right.
Aesthetically and rhetorically, and so forth. And then over time, essentially what ends up happening is either the art itself or the values of whoever decides what's canon or not, eventually that sort of ends up favoring one critical interpretation, but then that could be revisited in the future. So it's like this conversation, but I think it's really important to understand that what you're doing is you're drawing an aesthetic sort of aesthetic evaluation of what the series has to offer. So if you draw a line at a certain point of Star Trek and you say, this is it, this is the canon of Star Trek, then that's actually really useful to someone who may not even agree with you, to understand, okay, this era of Star Trek has this value set.
Sure.
This era of Star Trek has that value set. And by drawing that line, now you actually, because this was actually a problem I ran into while doing a little research for the rebuilds. I was like, okay, so why do people like the rebuilds? What's special about these?
Right.
It's like impossible to find any like clear, really robust type of arguments why the rebuilds are
I think
great
that this,
so
unfortunately, like this whole point you're making is well said, but I think there's an unfortunate other side to it, which is the existence of like slop type content and slop type consumers that really are interested in just more of the thing they like in an uncritical fashion. The social aspect, look, if you're like there's like some like slice of life Evangelion like manga or anime that's like it's about like Asuka and Shinji and Rei like as normal high schoolers or something like that. Like, you might be the kind of Eva fan that, like, that's the thing that you like. I mean, and there's a lot of them. By the way, like, a lot of, like, girls like that kind of stuff. They're, like, the romantic one. There's one for Fate's Day Night I saw about just, like, the characters, if they, like, all went to school together and lived together.
Are these fan fiction, or are these official spin-offs or whatever?
I mean, they're not canon, as in they're clearly alt-universe versions of the story, but they're made by the studio. They're made...
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, they're, like, official stories and stuff. So, like, you could be the kind of fan that loves that. And by the way, I don't mind those kinds of things in particular either. It's just there's a clear, like, canon divide between these things, and that's what matters.
Exactly.
But, like, at a certain point, if you get a lot of that, I think so much of this is about, like, the mind of the consumer, really. And if a consumer begins to see, let's just say that exists. You got Eva, and there's a slice of life anime, and I know there's, like, a manga, but let's just look at those two things. So you're like, okay, I loved Eva. Maybe you're, not the most critical viewer of all time. That's okay. Then you watch the slice of life and you're like, that was fun. And then you find yourself being like, you know what? I miss Shinji. And then they announce the rebuilds, which are like basically sort of a sequel kind of alt universe thing where they tell like new stories with very similar, if not identical characters. Again, I have not watched the last two movies, so like I can't judge that deeply. But at a certain point, isn't it totally understandable for the culture, the individual, to start to get confused as the walls kind of break down and they're like, who is the real Shinji here after all? Who am I talking about when I mention Shinji Ikari and all these other characters? The answer is, it is like kind of totally subjective at a certain point. And I'm just pointing out many problems with that. Yeah.
Well, it shifts from a story to a premise. And that's a really big difference. So that's why I've been thinking about like saying this is like sitcom-ifying properties, because sitcoms, like the classic idea of a sitcom, and this was designed, this is what they wanted. Sitcoms were not stories. They were premises. That's how they were pitched.
Sure.
That's how they're written. So it's like, we need a strong premise. 5 20-somethings in New York. Boom. Premise.
It's a show about nothing. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, there you go. Seinfeld or whatever. Yeah. And that is what makes the sitcom format unique, is that is the entire basis of how they approach these. What is the premise? Boom. And then you write self-contained stories that use that premise and create different elements within that premise. So so for like a slice of life, right? So if you're like, okay, I'm making a slice of life anime, and what is the premise? That's very sitcom like, perfectly fine. The issue is when you take a story, which is Evangelion. Evangelion is not a premise. It's a story with a beginning and an end, famously. And what happens in between those 2 points is the character, the characters, the tone. So you can't, if you take a story and you take Shinji out of his story and then you stick him in a slice of life sitcom, he is not the same character.
Which, by the way, we see in like one of the last episodes of the show when he's like experiencing an alternate version of his own life where he's just like a normal high schooler. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening though is I almost feel like if it was somewhat satirical, if it was somewhat like really clearly, this is ridiculous, this is not actually involved with the original in any sort of way.
Right.
That almost works better than if you're like, if you try to integrate them, because you can't integrate them, because you can't take a character from an arc in a story, pull them out of that arc, and then stick them somewhere else, because it's not the same character.
Okay, again, I'm a little handicapped here again because I have not watched the last two movies, but so my understanding is that the fourth movie kind of does this, and that the whole point is that like the fourth movie sort of unites the timelines of Eva in like, once again, we're doing like a multiverse thing or whatever. I'm a little tired of those, but okay, we're doing it again.
You know what the multiverse is? The multiverse is glue. It is storytelling glue. That's why everything does multiverses. Everything does alternate timelines, because it's ridiculous. Because it's like, how do we get these characters from this scenario to this scenario, but they're gonna end here? Well, what if we make an alternate timeline, or what if we make a multiverse? It's like this narrative superstructure. You can put this on anything. You could do this to anything. Any work of Romeo and Juliet. They actually end up happily ever after in the end. Because there's a splinter timeline where Juliet doesn't commit suicide, and then in that splinter timeline they end up happily ever after. And then actually in another of Shakespeare's plays, they're together as a couple in one of those plays, because in the alternate timeline she's survived. And so then you take Juliet, and then she's actually, if in Othello, there's a character that in this alternate universe is actually Juliet. This is the type of thing.
I think that we end up with Romeo and Juliet in one of these timelines.
You can put it on anything. You can do this to anything. You can put it anywhere. It's like this.
Well,
it's like this cheat code of storytelling.
It's a cheat code.
Alternate timelines, multi universes. The second I see that, this is just me personally, I'm like, okay, I'm not taking your story seriously. I'm not taking this seriously.
There's plenty of meta stories that are like interesting. there's also a reality where we're getting too many meta stories and we're getting away from like core character stories and stuff. But let me just make this one point about this. Like, let's just, again, I haven't seen this movie, but my kind of understanding is that Eva 4 was like, okay, there's like at least 3 timelines of Eva. They're like kind of uniting. And look, now I'm projecting. I assume the point is that we get like the true ending of like, there's like all those mixed characters. Now we're after that. And by the way,
but that
the tagline
means End of Eva isn't the true ending, right?
Apparently not, based on the rebuilds, from what I know. I mean, we know that they're a sequel to End of Evangelion. It's called End of Evangelion, but by the way, the tagline on the posters of Eva 4 was like literally bye all of Evangelion. That's literally the tagline for the movie. It's on the poster, and like. And then we find out, and we're making more, actually. We're making a new show. It's like, okay, I mean, look, maybe this Yoko Taro show will be the best thing of all time.
Didn't he say he wanted to take Eva from a story into it being like Gundam, where it's like kind of a
he thought it could be told with like other people telling the stories. So Anno did say that, so like everyone's like, okay, Nate, you're being disingenuous. The point is, like, yes, like Anno's version of the story is concluded, but now like other people can pick up the story and go on. And like, okay, that's true. He did say that.
It's not a story.
In like,
it's a premise.
You're absolutely right. But the point is that
have a,
now we need to individually judge all of those things, which we can do. But my big question is just like, is this actually good or useful, considering all the bad examples we've seen? And again, I have no choice in this scenario but to speak in generalities, because look, Yoko Taro's show, like, I know there was like a trailer released or whatever, but like maybe it's not written completely yet, maybe it's not done. The point is, like, it might not even exist yet in its complete form. It probably doesn't. Maybe the story hasn't been fully written yet. But all I can do as a consumer is judge based on the pattern of behavior that I've seen before to determine if I'm into this or not. I like Yoko Taro. I really enjoyed like Nier Automata. Thought it was an excellent game. I thought it was well written. I played a little of some of the other stuff. I really like Drakengard 3. I also beat that game. It was awesome. I haven't consumed like a ton of other stuff that he's done. But this isn't even really about him. And again, I'm not the biggest Eva expert, haven't read the manga, haven't watched 2 of the rebuild movies, etc.
I just experienced this myself with Ninja Gaiden 4, where do I like Bayonetta? Yes. Do I like Ninja Gaiden? Yes.
Right.
Does Ninja Gaiden need to become Bayonetta?
Right.
No. No, it does not. Let Bayonetta be Bayonetta. Let Ninja Gaiden be Ninja Gaiden.
Well, let's examine this premise, because I think a lot of people would probably go to this point.
Because one must override the other. One must win.
Obviously, that's going to happen when like new studios and new teams start working on a property. They're going to project their values, their style onto it, obviously. So like, I mean, there's questions about, will Taro Eva like really be Eva? I mean, we don't know what the story is. Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel? Is it a new no one knows. No idea. So we can only talk about the general concepts. But to your example of Ninja Gaiden 4, so like what would you say is better? Because I think this is where we hit the fault line of different viewings.
There's no Ninja Gaiden.
That's a perfectly coherent
Ninja Gaiden is such a clear extension of his values as a designer. Team Ninja comes from Itagaki. And so a quick note of clarification on this topic, and if you want to hear my full extensive thoughts, definitely check out my Ninja Gaiden review. But I do acknowledge that video games are a collaborative medium, and so it is possible for Team Ninja to create a new Ninja Gaiden game that is in the spirit of Itagaki's vision. But in the case of Ninja Gaiden 4, all Platinum did was rip out the core of Ninja Gaiden's triangle system, like I talked about in the review, and then slotted in the most generic, half-baked automated combat system in its place. So it's pushing further away from the series' identity than even Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge did. And so at this point, yes, some of the surface elements are similar, but the underlying values no longer line up. So basically, no Itagaki, no Ninja Gaiden.
Let's lose the goodwill of the audience here for a moment by asking the following question. What do you think is a better version of reality? The reality where, the current reality where they made Ninja Gaiden 4 as is with the team at like Platinum or whatever, whoever it was that made it, or that game simply is not made And those people go in
number
and just
two,
do
baby.
other stuff.
Number 2.
Okay, see, right
I will
there.
Take option number 2 all
I
day,
know
every
we're
day.
going to lose people with that because I always have these. People are like, no, more of the thing I like is
Nate,
good.
You got to lose them. You got to lose them because
look, I'm okay with that. I lost them long ago.
There's no way to stop that.
When I did my rant about Tifa's tits, I knew I was losing people long ago.
But
that's
you gained,
okay.
Nate, you gained me. I saw that rant. I was like,
You're right.
This guy is amazing.
Very true.
I love where he's coming from.
We clearly have many shared values here, no doubt about it.
I think the thing about, especially like YouTubing and being a critic, is you cannot win everyone. It is impossible. It is just impossible because, like I said, everyone has different values. Everyone has different things they're looking for. But what you can do is you can clarify your values and you can clarify where you're coming from. And sometimes people will be like, no, you lose me. But then over time, and sometimes they don't. They just don't. You just lose them and they don't like you.
Right.
But sometimes I've got so many messages like this. Like people are like, all right, after a few months, it kind of sat with me, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I see where you're coming.
And they probably know that you're sincere. You're not, because I get this accusation sometimes that you're rage baiting or something, but you're not. You're sincere, obviously.
And you're also internally coherent. That is so important.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Today's media landscape and like quote unquote criticism of media landscape is so incoherent. It's nonsense.
It's certainly schizo and fractured.
Because it actually just needs to follow, like you said, marketing trends.
Right.
It's like, is this popular? Therefore I like it. Is this popular? But what happens, and it's really funny, you can see this in mainstream game reviews, is sometimes things that are like not within the current mainstream paradigm will randomly become popular. And then critics are in like this weird leg bind where they're like, okay, normally I'm supposed to dislike this. Yeah. But people like it and it's popular. So now I gotta like, I guess, accept it.
Yeah.
That happens from time to time, which is really funny.
It's always interesting. And so just going back to like, why make a new Evangelion story? And it's true, Anno said, like, other people can tell the story. Okay, the question that is relevant here is why do it? And okay, like let me just go through my thought process here. So like, I'm sure it's always possible that you could tell more good, like objectively good stories in any given universe. That's true. But the more you do, the more it gets fractured, the more schizophrenic it goes, etc. All that stuff happens. Like, do we need a story of Misato's sexual exploits in college? I don't think that story needs to be told personally. I think we understand all that already perfectly well in the story. But there are just as many that like are actually good and could be told. So like, why not do it? Well, that's when it comes down to opportunity cost. Okay, but before they said like, why do it, right? Why do it?
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
I guess one of the biggest dividers. I think this is where you're asking like, where do we lose people? Where do I lose people? I believe in a creative authorship. You know, I view the artist as an author of their work, and that has a lot of important values to me because, for instance, why is it easier to accept Resident Evil 1 Remake? Because Mikami made it.
Sure.
It was an extension of his creative, and you can see it in the result of his work. It is coherent with his design,
and by the
because
way,
he designed it.
Like 5 years later, he's still the same man. He didn't totally like change his opinions on, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we can also make that, I would also extend that to End of Evangelion as well.
Made like 2 years later or whatever it was. So
yes.
Yeah.
And it's still within that creative like vision of what he's going for here. What I always get nervous about, what I always get nervous about is when you start to see backpedaling of values, when you start to see like really lofty, like vague goals. Like didn't he say he's making the rebuilds to save anime or something like that?
I'm not sure. Maybe that sounds a little grandiose for him, but so I don't know. Maybe he said that, maybe not.
The anime industry or something. I read that anyway, but who knows if
maybe.
that's
if he did, then that's, sucking his dick a little bit hard,
But when it starts to get outside of like that very immediate expression of the author, to me, it's not a question of can someone else take Evangelion, a great writer, and then reshape it into their own vision and then create their own work. They definitely could, but why not have your own original expression? Why do you have to filter your original vision? It's like actually kind of a weird reverse compromise where it's like you have an amazing, like Yoko Taro, I don't know much about him, but I'm assuming he's like pretty awesome dude and everything, right?
He's generally quite liked, and I like his work that I've seen, yes.
So why does let's reverse it. Why does he have to filter his vision through Evangelion? Why does he have to compromise
let me just
his
add on
expression into the form of Evangelion?
So he's
why
something
can't
of
he create his own original ID?
Let me just say, because at a certain point, what they want isn't 100% relevant, because like he is like an Eva super fan, and it's widely been said, and I believe this is true, that like his work is greatly influenced by Eva, so he is probably really excited about the idea of doing his but that comes with concern, because like what if his vision of Eva is not like ours, or whatever it is. So
the recent Wuthering Heights, which is, we all know, a masterpiece.
Indeed.
She was a Wuthering Heights super fan.
Sure.
You know how much, I don't know when this became like a golden ticket to like remake other people's work. Cause like, I'm a super fan, therefore I have artistic authorship over the work.
Well, like this guy,
to me that's already, I want a more convincing point.
Now it's like,
that's like not a convincing point in the slightest.
That's sort of the argument that like if you get permission from the IP holder, then the art is valid and you can't like that's obviously nonsense.
It's exactly
obviously.
the same.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
And by the way,
I think a much more. I'll give you a much more convincing one, which is the Berserk continuation, right? Because the guy who's continuing it is the original Berserk author. Is like, I have anointed you.
Yeah, right.
To continue. I think that has value. When the original author, like, because another one that I really like a lot, which people don't talk about too much, is Christopher Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien's son. That type of thing where it's like the author is passing on for like a really good reason, not for money, for like a legitimate reason. Like
Miura literally died, and
that is the ultimate reason for me. But something like that, where it's like, okay, someone needs to continue this onward, and I, as the author, have selected you. I have anointed you as the continuation of this work, and I'm giving you guidelines. That to me is so much more artistically valid than, I watched a lot of Evangelion when I was, growing up, and I really love it. Boom, it's my IP. I mean, there's lots of things I really love I shouldn't be put in charge of in terms of
sure. And I don't know about everybody else, but like, while I am sympathetic to that, when it comes to like Berserk, I've never looked at Berserk the same, and I have not gone back, because I have this big, it's not Miura making it. It's like always going to be filtered through another guy. To me, it's like not real Berserk, but I mean, I understand why other people find it valuable.
That would be like, I agree completely. It's like, if you have like degrees of canon as a critic, it's like the ultimate, I would say like the ultimate Berserk canon is that like that first arc when he was just really cooking, and you're like,
he changed a lot after that. Guts. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so to me, that is like the epitome of Berserk. That first chunk there.
That's a coherent view.
And point of clarification, when I talk about the first chunk, I don't mean those opening few pages where Guts has sex with the demon and kills her, though I do like the vibe of that, because I do agree that isn't in keeping with how his character develops later on, and I always sort of view that section, that little bit there, as sort of a prototype of the vibe and the story, but not quite fully formed. But if you cut that, then all of the early stuff, I think, is really unique and special, and what I would consider my favorite parts of the series. That's what I'm saying. Canon is not this like objective thing. It's like you define it and then you defend it. Define and defend.
That's true, but I think, look, I feel this in myself. It's like, okay, while you're absolutely right, people get a little bored, get a little tired of being like, okay, everything's subjective. It's like, can we just cut to the chase and be like, what's the real version already? And I bet for Berserk, they're going to be like, Golden Age Guts is like real Guts, is like what they would say. Yeah. Even though that's not scientifically like accurate. It obviously is subjective, but...
the way I think about this, because everyone, subjective is one of those words that people kind of throw around to mean... it's whatever, man. It's your opinion. It's whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, I would say everything is subjective, but not everything is equally convincing.
Absolutely.
So everything is subjective. So I have my subjective viewpoint of Berserk, which is very, I feel it very strongly.
Sure.
Right? The opening part of Berserk, I think that defines it as a work of art.
Sure.
So then now, it's one thing to be like, okay, this is how I feel. And then maybe some other person's like, oh, I love the part where it gets all, more mushy and kind of softer.
Yeah.
So then the second step is how internally consistent and convincing can you be? How how robust is your critique to defend that original part of what you would consider canonical? So I definitely agree that you can kind of see it with Berserk as like I would say the dark crazy shit. And then as it gets softer and it kind of it gets a little less interesting, I would say it's like, okay, it's still canonical Berserk, but we're losing those values. And then I could definitely agree with you, like, and then the original author dies. That's a big drop.
That's a big dividing line right there.
Yeah, it's a big dividing line. I feel like you could tolerate, kind of like marginally accept the continuation, since it's like he did try to pass it on. But I agree completely. It's never the same as the original artist. I just I put a lot of value in the author's original expression, a lot, and I think more than most people do. That's like a real foundation of where I come from, is the author's expression, the author's vision. Now, it's not perfect, and sometimes it can go awry, especially as they get further on into their life and they start to have all these self-doubts and they start revising their own work. But I almost feel like that's why critics coming in saying, no, don't doubt yourself. Like the original, like End of Eva was amazing. Like, don't doubt yourself. This was good. And then, so that's where I would be with this kind of stuff. And I don't really find it that interesting, because I find a lot of this to be just corporate fan fiction at the end of the day.
Well, I think it's interesting to note, like, sort of the effects of the market, even on, like, original production of things. So, just for example, I want to say about the rebuilds, for example, and, any subs like the Taro, Eva, and any stuff that's going to come in the future. So, on the one hand, I get a lot of people saying that, like, the rebuilds are, like, artistically brilliant and they love them, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, for years, I have heard the argument made, like, half the time that, like, because I didn't really love them, the first one is, like, kind of a remake of the first 4 episodes. Like, did we really need that? And they're like, the reason we did it is to make money, to make other shows and fuel, like, Studio Kara, so that, like, Anno and other people can make money. And, like, okay,
I feel like, though,
but if you make that argument, you're just giving up the whole artistic claim right there. You're saying that, like,
I agree.
No,
I agree completely, Nate.
Yeah, okay.
That's like showing your hand in poker. You just turned your hand over and I win.
And I guess
for
some
me,
people
that's how I feel.
Well, I guess some people would argue.
I win.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I always feel like with these, like, market discussions and money discussions, I get the whole economic situation. Yeah. But I'm not an economic critic. I don't critique things based off of whether they make money. Like, it made $5 billion, therefore it's good. It made no money, therefore it's bad. No.
That, like, who gives a shit about that? However, I am somewhat sympathetic to the fact that, like, they do have to make money in order to operate. Although, look, there are various business models these days that you can do things in different ways. But as a critic, then, though,
it's so easy. You say, okay, that means the rebuilds are purely a product for money. They have no artistic effect on the canon. They are just products of money. Right?
Well, okay, so this gets into sort of the interplay between, like, money and art creation, because it's a little bit complex. And so one of the responses I got to, like, my discussing this online is like, Nate, what you're describing is the deleterious effects of capitalism on art and how it's fucking this whole thing up. And let me just say my response to that here briefly. So the short answer is that, like, I agree in some ways and disagree in other ways, because there definitely are issues, like, with the profit motive when it comes to art creation that can make you, like, I'll give you $1 million if you, like, cut this scene that's pivotal to the plot. And you're like, well, okay, that's just, like, the most basic possible example. But, like, so we cannot blame capitalism as a concept for, like, the specific failures of all art pieces, if for no other reason than it was under this system that we currently live in that, like, all my favorite recent artworks were made. Final Fantasy VII, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy. Like, Final Fantasy VII is a good example as, like, a product made by a company that, like, is brilliant and amazing, but was very much designed with, like, the marketing team being consulted to, like, okay, we're making it 3D, we're doing a big push, we're selling PlayStation units with this, but then we just got, like, one of the most legendary RPG stories of all time that everybody loves, and we're so obsessed with that we have to endlessly retell and remake that story until we all fucking die in, centuries from now. So clearly it can be done. Yeah.
I just want to laugh about something really
Yeah,
funny.
go for it. Go for it.
It's like there was some sort of anniversary for FF7 recently,
I think
right?
the 30th year anniversary.
Right.
Oh, no, that'll be next year. That'll be next year.
Someone sent me something like just being like, "Oh, it's the 30th anniversary of FF7." I was like, Square has been doing nothing but FF7 stuff for like.
Well,
how do you even celebrate? How would you even celebrate this? Oh, we're gonna remake it again.
We'll remake it again.
Yeah, like
God.
It's so central to what they're doing that it having an anniversary can't even have any sort of celebration. Because we're gonna do more Final Fantasy VII now?
Well, okay, so
I just thought that was really funny.
I mean, it is funny, but so Square Enix. Okay, obviously. So people are like, oh, capitalism, greed, that's the problem, etc. I don't agree. The problem I see is that a couple things. One, the AAA gaming landscape in which we live is inherently bottlenecking tons of game production. Like, why did a new Final Fantasy come out every goddamn year in like 1997, 8, 9, 10, 2001? One was Tactics, but nonetheless. Because
Tactics rules.
Sorry, say again.
I love Tactics.
Tactics is great. Tactics is great. I mean, it was like basically one per year of like some of the most legendary RPGs of all time. Clearly, it can be done. What the hell has happened since then? Now you get like a new Final Fantasy every decade or something like that. Wow, yes. We're getting fucked. What's going on here? A lot of that is the AAA landscape where guys, consult the chart, consult the Mickle chart, guys. Okay, go watch my Mickle video. It was kind of talking about this stuff where like they feel the need to chase like graphical perfection and blah blah blah, like cinematic masterpieces and all this stuff. I've recently
games as service too. It's huge.
That's another issue too. I've been playing like Claire Obscura, for example, which is like a cool RPG. I like it a lot, but like it's literally too cinematic, and I want them to shut the fuck up and stop doing motion capture for like every single scene. Oh my god, shut up, stop moving, just move on, let me go through this fucking cutscene. I do not care. I care about like the text dialogue is fine, but I don't care about like it has values in making that game I just straight up dislike and don't want. And like a lot of this is the sort of product of like AAA game design, even if I don't know if that game's technically AAA, but whatever, close enough. Doesn't matter. The point is to say that half of the issue is the particular zeitgeist, the technological landscape in which we live. The other is I don't really think that it is greed is the reason we're getting like, Nate, you hate the remakes.
I agree.
Like, what's going on?
I agree.
I think it's not corporate greed. Desperation to get a safe bet on a profitable IP that they feel will work. If you examine the corporate structure of like Square Enix then and now, they have, look, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that they have ballooned, but they haven't just ballooned. They were kind of a scrappy company, like in the late 80s, into the 90s. They were coming into their own over like that decade-long period of making those like original Final Fantasy games. But then you find yourself a titan of industry, a corporate juggernaut who has like people on the fucking payroll and investors and all kinds of shit. And you're like, holy shit. If we fail with one game, we're fucked. So forget all this little, like, we have to do the thing that everybody wants with AAA games. I don't agree, but that's how they see it. And like they're sort of captured just by the media landscape they find themselves in. And like that's true of video games in particular, which are so intertwined with like the new technology of the day and how they're spectacle pieces and all that stuff. Animation is a totally different story in many ways. So those two can be very much separated, but like so is capitalism the problem? Like kind of, but not really, no. And the real conclusion that I come to here is that like businesses need to make money. Capitalism is not ending anytime soon. I can't really do anything about that. So personally, I get that there are criticisms of like the profit motive. I make money myself, but like I'm not going to spend a lot of my personal time stressing about that because I just can't fucking do anything about it. And when Star Trek happens finally, and we've eliminated all want, and people can just do whatever they want all day, like, great. We'll revisit this question then and see what makes sense. But for right now, I kind of just don't give a fuck and just don't want to think about it because the only thing that I can actually do something about is let people know when, like, their game sucks or whatever it is and yell about it. But yeah, go on, Mark, go on.
Well, I think it's really, this was, I don't know how you'd call it, like sort of a parry of critique that you see a lot.
Sure,
is that this has to happen because of capitalism and all that sort of stuff. It's like accepting capitalism as being, well, everything's going to suck. therefore do not criticize anything. It kind of what it comes back to every time, because how else could you respond to this critique?
Well,
like
I think that like one good way to put it is that like it's obviously true. Great art has been made under many different systems. Somebody was like, Shakespeare. I mean, that was like mercantilism or whatever. So like there was like capitalism was developing for sure. But under feudalism, like the Pope commissioned Michelangelo, and that's like effectively feudalism or something, right? So like
Middle Age art is awesome. I love Middle Age art.
Sure.
These people saying this, are they legitimately saying we need to go to middle-aged art? And,
well, they're more like we need to institute
art?
Socialism is generally the idea that we're getting at.
Because
here.
if the argument is we need to take it back to the Middle Ages and do stick-ass middle-age art, I'm all on board with that.
Okay.
But that's not what they're arguing
Look, I mean, I'll throw them a bone. Like, so for example, one of the most artistically impressive pieces of filthy commie art is when like the Napoleon movie from the 70s, I think it's just called Napoleon.
Oh yes.
Which is
yes,
like,
I know that one.
It has some of the most astounding battlefield scenes of all time, because like the USSR government like put their money behind the film and had like their gigantic military apparatus.
And I'm assuming they didn't give a shit what happened to the extras either,
well, see,
right?
That's exactly the point. Like, we can't just like say, well, they made a cool piece of art, so we concerned about nothing else they did. And look, I don't know, guys, maybe communism is the way, the truth, and the light. Okay, I'm not an expert here. I suspect that isn't the case, but that's not what I'm talking about.
I would say,
I'm just saying under any system, it can be done.
I would say it's just too macro of a critique to really do anything with. It's too.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Wide, as an art critic. Like there's points there, but it's such a wide, massive concept that how would you even tackle this as a critic? How would you even be like,
you have to become a political analyst to get to the level of like discussion that's kind of raised by this critique, and I'm not smart enough to do that.
Exactly. That's how I feel about this too. It's like there are points happening here, but it's way too outside of
you've just
got
to know your lane.
Capable of.
I guess what it comes down to. And so
exactly.
There you go. But all right, so whatever. I mean, just because that was like a common response, I thought I'd mention that. So like, look, I mean, if that's your thing, I mean, hey, go argue everybody about it. That's fair enough. I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about here. But so let me make this point. I want to go back to the whole like concept of like slop and like piling more on a series and if it does damage, because I got some reasonable people were telling me that like, Nate, you're delusional, you're silly. No, it is not bad to just like make more stuff. In like a genre, in a series, etc. And I kind of already made my argument, but I want to talk about one specific example in particular that I am personally experiencing. So like this is because people have trouble with this concept. It is a little bit complex, but let me make my example here. And it's about Star Trek once again. So I want to discuss just the concept of like Starfleet within Star Trek. Starfleet is a concept from the original show, came up with by Gene Roddenberry, the original visionary who everybody loves. Okay, Gene's great. Kind of a weirdo, but he's obviously made like the coolest thing ever. Everybody loves Star Trek. Okay, so Star Trek exists, or rather Starfleet is the concept that like that's what, the Enterprise is a member of. It's like a fleet, whatever. But the point is like Starfleet, humanity, etc. Starfleet as an extension of humanity from that era, that like idealized future, has like values and has like specific things that it has done in the story that you as a fan watching through the show can like identify with, feel is like cool or whatever. So imagine yourself as like a dude with a Starfleet t-shirt because you watched TNG and you loved it. That's who you are, viewer, in this scenario. You're a TNG lover, Starfleet shirt wearing dude. Okay, so that's who you are. So you're watching along and you love Starfleet. Oh, it's pretty cool. Not every member of Starfleet is perfect. There are like some admirals that do bad stuff, but generally the institution does like basically 100% good things all the time. By the way, and that's because that was Gene Roddenberry's vision of the story. This is like core to Gene Roddenberry's version of the future of Starfleet, etc., that like humanity is good. It was literally against the rules for any of the main crew of the Starfleet, of the Starship Enterprise in TNG, to have interpersonal conflicts. They have to be like possessed or something if there's going to be like some argument or fight or whatever. So like, yes, humanity has figured its shit out. Starfleet are the good guys. It's over. That's what's happening here. Okay. So that's back in the TNG era and like the classic era. Fast forward a couple of decades to a little show called Star Trek Picard. Okay, now all of a sudden we're presented with a couple of narratives in Star Trek Picard that reframe some of what Starfleet does in a way that I humbly submit is not in keeping with Roddenberry's original vision. And remember, you're sitting there, you're wearing your Starfleet shirt, and you watch whoa, more Picard? Let's see what's going on. Okay, the following events transpire in Star Trek Picard. Okay, I got 2 examples. One, Starfleet watches the Romulan species, race, whatever, like their planet, their sun, whatever, explodes, and they all start to die. And the Starfleet's position is fuck them. We don't care. Let them die. And like our lone good guy Picard is like, I'm going to try to save them. Okay, good guy Picard doing something nice, even though they were like the enemies of the Federation forever. Starfleet taking sort of the genocidal position here. Okay, counterexample. In Star Trek VI, the undiscovered country of the original series, like the exact same thing happens where the Klingons have like their suns exploding or a moon's whatever, it doesn't matter. But like the Klingons are like all gonna die if Starfleet doesn't help them. Kirk, personally, is like, let them die. Fuck the Klingons. They killed my son. I want them all dead. But Spock, as a representative of all of Starfleet, is like, no, we're gonna help them, Kirk. You need to get over this. And for the record, Kirk buries his feelings and helps on the mission as the captain of Starfleet that he is, because he knows he's got to do it. And by the way, he learns like, okay, I shouldn't be this way, etc. Okay, so like the new Picard is like, Starfleet's all about letting their enemies die. Fuck them. In TOS, written by Roddenberry, or Roddenberry involvement or whatever, with his approval, was like, of course Starfleet would never do that. That's insane. You're getting the deal that there's like a different kind of Starfleet. You look down at the shirt you're wearing and you're like, that colors Starfleet in a rather negative way. Okay, next example. I've only got like 2 little ones here. In Picard, there's like an android uprising or like synth uprising on a planet because there are these android guys, or they're synths, whatever, that like are sentient robots, synths, whatever, that like are just enslaved by the Federation and they don't care. Okay, that's weird because in TNG, there was a whole episode called Measure of a Man where they literally had a court trial and decided that Data was a person with like human rights or, alien rights, whatever you want to call it. Not to mention there was the Doctor in Voyager who's like a hologram synthetic person, but like he gets rights too eventually. So like we've literally addressed this question previously. Starfleet is just like, fuck them. We don't care. And the whole point is that Starfleet are the good guys that adjudicate the right thing. But now, because the writers want more drama and want there to be conflict like this within Starfleet, you look down at your shirt with Starfleet and you start to think of, these are the guys that like enslaved sentient robots, even though the previous show said that's bad. These are the guys that like left the Romulans to die and said fuck them, even though in the old show, in the old movie, they said don't do that. I'm now getting like conflicting feelings about the fucking t-shirt I'm wearing right now. That's weird. And there's also this other whatever shit about like my boy Barclay was like an autist who everybody hated in the original show. Or in TNG, until Captain Picard was like, be nice to the autist, let him live up to his potential, and they did it, and it was the best thing ever. Barclay's my hero. Barclay's my favorite guy ever. Look, I don't know, Strange New Worlds, fucking Discovery, I don't know what the fuck show it is. I've just seen the scene where like a similar autist guy is like treated like an asshole and just like kicked off to the curb, and he fucking dies, because that's funny, haha, we let the like retarded guy die instead of helping him or whatever. Just like cynicism, bad vibes, all these things are like making you feel bad about Starfleet as a concept. And now you're like, you know what? I don't want to wear my Starfleet shirt anymore. This kind of sucks. You take it off, you throw it away. You see what I'm describing, everybody here? This is like, everyone's like, just ignore it. Just ignore the stories you don't like. And let's say you do that. And you walk around your Star Trek convention and somebody's like, hey, nice Starfleet shirt. You gonna enslave any robots here today? And you're like, motherfucker, God. And now you look like you're an idiot because you just sit around ignoring canon things that are happening. And you're like, it's not real. It's not true. It didn't happen. But you ignore them, but they don't ignore you. They are canon. These things were done. And it all affects everything. All this argument about like, oh, it doesn't affect anything if you just don't care. It actually does matter. Now, I spend my time actively actively ignoring them and pretending they're not real, but like it isn't 100% effective, and it's annoying that these things happened to begin with by the people writing it, like not fully understanding the premise, or not sharing your values and like Roddenberry's values, or the stuff that you liked. It continues and it can go wrong is the point here. So that's what I have to say about people that are like, it doesn't matter, just ignore the stuff you don't like. You can ignore it. It's not ignoring you. Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a funny story about this.
Please
sort of like an example of this in action, which was the other day on YouTube, I saw a video that said Capcom added some sort of de novo type of software to Resident Evil 4.
Sure.
And then the thumbnail was of Resident Evil 4, the real one.
Oh.
So Steam started coming out of my ears. Like,
right. See, there it is.
I was like, no. And so I went and I was like, this is unbelievable. Capcom, I was like furious.
Yeah.
I open it.
It's deceptive.
The video is about the remake. The video
Naturally.
is not about the original game. And you see this all the time. We're getting to a point now where people just interchangeably equate the remake to the original, to the point where they will use the original's artwork to say that the remake got some, de novo type of thing. It's like, wait a minute.
You're slandering the original, which bears no sin here by associating it with this new thing. Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time.
Exactly.
And we call that
all
skin suiting or skin walking. They insert themselves into the skin of the thing that everybody loves, and they're like, la la la, hooray, hooray. But that's not what's, it's deceptive, it's unfair, and I don't like it, is my great critique here. So
yeah, but also going back, I don't know much about Star Trek, obviously, but like with a series that you're describing, where they're clearly throwing the original show's values, out the window
for the
to
sake
do whatever
of new
they
drama
want.
narratives. Yes, for sure.
Why does it have to be Star Trek that they do this with? Why can't they have a whatever show they actually want
to make money, to have a profitable IP?
Exactly.
That's
and that's what it just goes back to this over and over again. Which then at what point is it like no longer acceptable for that to happen? I've drawn my line. We have our line, but if you're willing to tolerate this, right? I think a more interesting question is, if you're willing to tolerate it, how far can it go?
Let me give my example here. I always use the same example for this ever since I thought of it. But like, okay, so guys, we're reading One Piece, and next chapter, Oda released the new chapter. Luffy wakes up from a dream and realizes the entire story was not real. It was a dream. And then he goes to his Amazon workhouse job to clock in for his 9 to 5. And that's the rest of the story. This example, this is a betrayal of the story. But like, no one can stop Oda. I mean, the editors can probably, but like, he could do it. You could do that if you wanted to, but like, obviously that would be a betrayal, because that breaks so many of the reasons that we're reading the story. So creators, and first of all, imagine if like, it wasn't like someone bought out the IP and like a new author took over and like that was their next chapter of One Piece, and everyone would be like, fuck this. This is not what we signed up for. So like, it would be even worse. And that's kind of what you see a lot with like stories being continued by other people. So
right. So then where
is a line
that distinguishing? But where is it? I'm genuinely curious.
Debatable.
Where people draw these, because I spend hours trying to figure out, all right, where am I drawing my lines? And I think it is actually a very complex process if you actually start to really work on this question. You start having to factor in, like I said, where it's coming from, why, who's involved, what's happening. But you can start to form some sort of coherent picture as you do this. So I'm wondering if you push further out and you're willing to accept that, okay, we want to make Evangelion kind of like this premise that whoever is your famous anime director, he can now make an Evangelion spinoff. It's like, what are the parameters? What needs to be followed here, right? Because I would say Rebuild itself is already pushing a lot of the values, I would say.
Yes, it is. Yep.
I would say Eva has. That itself is already pushing them. So then how far can you continue to push it? Like, what is the limit?
I think it is subjective, and I think a lot of people would kind of punt on this question and just see like whatever sells, whatever gets like the money, whatever gets the views. But then you're always gonna have people like you and me that are like screaming and hollering and being like, but what about like this, like, I mean, my thing with Eva is like, no, End of Evangelion really well ended that story in a meaningful way. I know Anno, like to me, I think the world would be better off if, like, okay, I'm really bothered by the fact that it took 4 movies to get to, like, the end story. Like, the only takeaway that people give me,
it's like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Dude. You need 3 games. Like that. But you need 3 games.
This is
to
an
get
anime,
there,
so they don't even have like the video game defense like those do because it's so much bigger. But like, why it took 4 movies to make the ultimate point that, like, the ending I made originally was too doom and gloom, and I'm going to, like, now kind of tell, like, a more positive, like, that really does not require 4 movies to tell that story. And he kind of discovered it as he went on, I'm sure. Like, that first movie you could literally cut and change basically nothing. So yeah, I mean, it's just endlessly gonna be debates about, like, what people find acceptable, what they don't, where they want the story to go, their values differ.
I think I do have just an observation, the actual answer here, which is that when the property gets finally mined out of social interest, that's when it fails. So as long as you can make social interest happen and continue to build it, then it's valid in this kind of
But doesn't that mean they'll just never stop? As like, Eva definitely hasn't, like, people like Eva, they're going to keep going if that's the case.
Well, for our generation of people, yes. But imagine if they were going to do a remake of I Love Lucy.
Sure. People would not. I mean, look, honestly, people might check it out just for, like, the curiosity of it. But
yes, but how far is that going to go? Is that going to go 10 seasons?
Probably not.
Of an I Love Lucy remake?
Probably not.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I'm noticing is that basically what's happening is you take the property, you kind of turn it into a sitcom, right? You turn it into a premise, and like sitcoms, you keep going till it just doesn't work anymore, and then you drop it. That's like the formula, basically. We're seeing everything get turned into sitcoms. So Ava's going to keep going in this model as long as it continues to generate interest and people engage with it. And no matter what artistic damage is made along the way, that isn't really a concern.
For most people, yeah.
We won't worry about that now.
Right.
We'll worry about that when no one cares.
That's
when no one cares, then it will matter. That's the funny thing. Like, if you take a property that's older that no one cares about, you have so much license to be like, this is the canon, this is it, and everyone will be like, okay, yeah, I accept that. But if it's something people care about, as long as it keeps going, you know, it's like running from a tidal wave. As long as it just keeps running, eventually it's going to get hit by it and it will get submerged. We will see that happen, but it's just this mining out process, basically. And that's what everyone's really jazzed about right now. And I think we're just going to have to continue to complain about it. You know, it's like, don't do that. Don't do that. They're going to continue to do it. But then hopefully at some point, people looking back and they're like, I don't know if that was really the best thing to do to pour whatever series, whatever artistic IP. And maybe that's just, and time washes all of this away. You know, that's the funny part. Like,
that's true.
I was thinking about this today. I was looking up like most popular sitcoms from like the 70s and like most popular movies. It's insane how much stuff was popular during its era that we have no idea even existed.
Mork and Mindy Bros, raise your right hand and swear.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or even something as recent as the Drew Carey Show. The Drew Carey Show was a massive show. It was a recent sitcom. Like,
nobody talks about the Drew Carey Show.
No one talks about the Drew Carey Show. So I feel like what ends up happening, here's the scary part though, is like, if you keep doing this and you just turn everything into slop, does that mean when the tides of time come, the slop is going to like weigh down the original work and it'll just wash it all away with it?
That's the concern,
Because, for example, there's a sitcom, Parks and Rec, that I watched when it was coming out, and that is like a show of talk about ups and downs and all this kind of stuff. And so my friend was like, hey, do you want to, I'm thinking about watching Parks and Rec. And I'm like, okay, listen, you need to skip the first, this part, and then you need to watch like these 3 seasons, and then you need to like not watch the rest.
Right.
So like the more complex and weird you make a franchise,
Right.
I think it ultimately does damage it, but it takes time to see that damage. Like, we're not seeing it now because it's right here, but as it goes on and on and on, like, for example, you know, everyone always talks about this, but it's like really obvious examples, like Star Wars now.
Yeah, right.
If someone even says Star Wars, I am instantly like, whatever, I don't give a shit.
Why don't we watch Star Wars 1? Oh, you mean Star Wars 4? Right. No, I mean the Star Wars 1970, whatever. Yeah, like, it's complicated
because
just to even reference.
I've never been a hardcore Star Wars guy. Never. I've never cared about Star Wars that much. Sure. But I remember when they were doing the Disney ones coming out, it's like, okay, well, let's see what's happening here. So I think that's what everyone did. Big Star Wars fans. Like, let's see what's going on here. We'll check it out. There's no way you're going to get me to watch anything Star Wars now.
Same.
After
do not care.
Seeing what I saw, I was like, I could not be bothered. You could say, oh, this is the greatest revitalization of Star Wars we've ever seen. I don't care. Because in my mind, I have now mentally categorized Star Wars as like just general Disney crap.
That's kind of the thing.
I just put it mentally in that category. Oh, that's general Disney crap.
This is sort of the slopification of a property like this is sort of what we're seeing. And the thing is, it's not an immediate process. It's sort of a long degradation over time that eventually leaves people like really not giving a shit, as it does seem like Star Wars is like kind of getting to that point. I'm not, it's still big, whatever. I don't fucking know. I don't care. I'm not a Star Wars guy. But like, I used to be a big fan. I don't care at all now. I'm totally not interested. So, I mean, that's just one example, but it does feel like more people, or how about this? Game of Thrones, for example,
it's getting there, isn't it?
It is getting there. I watched the original show, obviously loved it, obviously the ending was pretty shitty, and that made me fall out of love with it massively, until the House of the Dragon came out, and for years I said, fuck it, like, I had a bad experience, I'm not going back. Then I watched season 1. I was like, actually, this is like not terrible. There's things I don't like, but overall pretty good. Then I read the book of Fire and Blood. I thought this book was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Then they made season 2, and I was like, oh, they're fucking it up horribly. They are not doing it good at all. And now I'm at the point where there's a new show. The Dunk and Egg show at Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I'm like, I look at my experience. I'm like, okay, there were some good things, there were some bad things. I have not watched it. I probably will watch that just to like, because there's been, I don't know, like morbid curiosity, just to like see how I did read that story that story's based on.
It's still within like that there could be something here territory.
Yeah.
But let's say this goes on for another 5 years.
Well, that's what everybody's afraid of. Yeah, it going bad too.
Yeah, and I do think that does have an effect, ultimately,
no doubt.
In the long run. You don't feel it totally immediately, but in the long run, because basically I realized this with Parks and Rec. If you have to like start like slashing up the entire canon of the show or the art into like these like very specific sections, and you have to like be like, all right, go here, and then go up and down, skip that, make sure to go here. And you're describing this to people are like, oh, this is a giant piece of shit. Like, if you're having to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just because whenever people recommend stuff to me and they start doing that, in my mind, I'm like, uh-oh. You know, where it's like, watch Sopranos, boom, done.
Right,
it's like, well.
A lot easier that way, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, the long, slow decline. Like, imagine this, guys. Like, some series comes out of something that's been dwindling for years, and, like, they start hitting you with ads for it because they're like, holy shit, we put, like, $100 million into this, and, like, people are not watching. How annoying will it be? This is where it's tangible for you, folks. Oh, my God, they're doing ads for this show that I'm not interested in? Just shut up and go away, bro. And then that tanks and things go to shit, and it's just a bad time for everybody. And this brings me back to the other piece of the puzzle, because, like, maybe those shows even do reasonably well financially, but people are kind of like, okay, I mean, there's a new season of this. It was okay, I guess. And I'm not saying that, like, the thing that is a original property is always good. That would be naive to say that it'll always be good when it's original. But there's hope, and I think it makes for healthier media production when that is where the focus lies, as opposed to mining old franchises over and over and over again, even if they're making a good amount of money. Like, this just isn't the way I want it to go. And again, this just brings me to my other point about even if it's going okay financially, if it's going great financially, the opportunity cost is the crucial thing that I want to make the point about. about how you're not getting, you know, fucking Final Fantasy 18, 19, 20 that are like original ideas instead of remake, blah, 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 whatever, that obviously I have problems with, etc. Instead of getting, I don't know, whatever else it is, fucking any example that you want to name. You know?
Whatever Anno could have worked on besides Evangelion.
Right, like, and maybe...
And I do think this is kind of fun, because I think
go ahead.
People more along the lines of like being authors, being writers, just because I'm more versed in literature than anime.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
But I always think of like, what you see this with writers a lot. There's nothing, it seems like, more frustrating for writers is if they have that one work that just defines them.
George R. R. Martin.
And they cannot exactly. Because like the great writers, I've noticed if they have at least two, they can escape this. You just need two.
Right.
Like you need War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Okay, you've got both of them. So then you become a writer. Oh, you are Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Ernest Hemingway or Faulkner or something. But if you have just that one book, unless you're Salinger and you hide away your entire life in an apartment or something, but if you have just that one work, it seems like it starts to eclipse the writer themselves, and then they start getting funky by the later in their career. You see it all the time happening, where they look back and they're like, I cannot escape this work. I give up trying to establish my own identity. Now I will just tinker with the work to try and like express myself now. You'll see this over and over again. If they have that one big work and then nothing else, it just haunts them.
Yeah. And we see that a lot. Obviously for Anno, it's Eva is the big one. That's why he's forced or whatever, chooses to revisit. He wants to retell the story, et cetera, whatever. But like he has other ones. Gunbuster, for example, best anime ever. It's up there at least. Love me some Gunbuster.
Like, I love authors that they have that big foundational work, but they keep moving forward. Yeah. Because then you create a body of work and like periods. Like, oh, do you remember that the Evangelion period? Do you remember that? And then he went on to this period. But if you have just this sort of self-eating career, it gets, I don't know. I don't think that's what you want to aim for. Yeah, it becomes kind of sad, kind of depressing, kind of frustrating. And it's not what you want to aim for, I don't think.
I'm sure Anno's having fun making his like Shin God. I mean, I really like Shin Godzilla, and Shin Ultraman was quite good too. And also Shin Kamen Rider was not that good, but whatever.
But
I guess
it's not
okay.
his voice, right?
It's all these other stories other people have told, and now he's putting his spin on it. I mean, it's not the worst way to spend your time in the world, especially like a series like Ultraman, or Ultraman literally has the world record for like most spin-offs. So like one more isn't gonna break the bank exactly with Ultraman. But like for him creatively, I don't know. I get why he'd want to do it. He loves them. He has the influence. He can make it happen. But you got to wonder, like, what is not being made while he's, you know, kind of playing with his toys.
Yeah, I think also too we forget that. Like an artist's lifespan, because we have to think about our own lifespans, so that's not fun to think about, but an artist's lifespan is actually extremely short historically. It doesn't matter even if you live to be 100. You actually have a very short lifespan, and you have a very finite amount of time. And one of my big motivations for becoming a full-time YouTuber is like, okay, it would make more sense financially if I sat at my desk job another 5 years and like, but then that's 5 years I'm losing in this creative period.
Right, sure.
And I feel like that's something that when we talk about art, it's something to point out. Like there is a finite amount of time that we have creators, that we have this capacity. And it's, if you spend 10 years doing remakes or whatever, not only are you losing a lot of potential works, but you're also losing that development, that 10 years that he could have been developing towards his final masterpiece. Because maybe, let's say he creates Ava, then he has like this kind of sort of stagnant 10 years where he's trying different things, they're not kind of working, but it's developing, it's going somewhere. And then you get to that late career like revitalization, and then boom. A band I really like called Swans did something like this, where they had like really cool early period, and then they had this kind of like weird middle period. You know, some of it's kind of cool, but it's kind of all over the place. And then the late career pops back in, and we get the Seer, and we get these amazing albums. And that middle period was really important into defining that later period. You can't go from Fitzgerald was the same way. He wrote he wrote This Side of Paradise. That was his big hit. That was his Evangelion. And then his had a bunch of a middle career, did not go well. He wrote his final masterpieces, The Great Gatsby, and then later on Tenders of the Night, died. And then after his death, everyone's like, oh, these are sick.
Right.
But imagine if, writers just spend their entire careers just spinning in circles, round and round and round and round. So,
and that's the thing. We can't tell somebody like Anno how to spend his life. Obviously, that's true, but it is worth. I think it's useful to have like Anno's never going to hear our voices. Does the man speak English?
Yes.
I doubt it. But
no, it's about
isn't it
the
useful
conversation
for us to
about
contribute.
art. Yeah.
Right, to contribute a critical voice, saying like, please keep this fact in mind that like many of us would love to see like an original property like Evangelion from you. I just think there is value to that, and it's useful. And, maybe we convince some people and that gets through and some Japanese dude hears it and tells Anno. Obviously, that it's not that simple, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, these things can have an influence. It's possible.
There's a Japanese writer that I really like, Haruki Murakami, and he has this really fleshed out career with different periods, and he had his early period, which was like kind of almost like hard-boiled detective kind of stuff, but funny. It's like funny kind of humor stuff. And then he wrote his like really heartfelt romance called Norwegian Wood. That's really good. And then he goes into this sort of darker, surreal period after that, and people really love that period. And then he's kind of getting older and a little bit shakier now.
Yeah.
But he has this career arc with like defining works that different people gravitate towards. And then as a reader, it actually says more about you, what you gravitate towards in his library, than it is about him. And I would say the same thing about when we're critiquing artists. We're not critiquing like their lifestyle. We're not critiquing the reality of their lives. What we're critiquing is their body of work, and then what we can learn from their body of work, basically.
I do think it is interesting, just to mention again, how Anno, the message that everybody loves from Evangelion 4, whatever, 3+1, is that, like, be a normal dude, live in the world. And Anno personally does not really do that.
I know, right?
It's not even really intended to be critical. I just think maybe he thinks that's what he should be doing. And he's, like, unable to due to whatever personal faults or personal hangups he has. And by the way, look, I don't know his life. He could be like a busy normal guy who's like having business meetings and hanging out with his family and going to the park on Sunday or doing whatever it is. I don't know that. I can only judge based on the limited amount I've seen like from his work, but it's all very oriented around these like properties he's loved since he was young, and like a desire to basically like apologize for his like most influential story, in some ways, to put it a little bit uncharitably, but you know what I mean. So I don't know. I just think that is worth looking at as like, if he had more of an influence on him. And again, I really don't want to harp on Anno that much specifically. This isn't really about him in particular, but it's like if a guy like that got more of a critique that's like, yeah, we've had enough of like retelling this story.
Yes.
Please tell us something new. I think that might be like a good thing. That might be beneficial for everybody, including him. Even though I know people liked the ending of Anno. And by the way, this is a funny time to mention. I'm aware that there is sort of like a, I wrote this down somewhere. There's sort of like a, what would you call it? Like a culture war overlap into sort of this particular like argument or whatever, which is like,
I didn't know that.
I mean, a little bit, yeah. It's like if you're pro rebuild, then you're like pro like being a normal, healthy, outgoing person. You're about like setting yourself free from like the shackles of otakuhood or whatever it is. Whereas if you're
I would say, isn't that mostly fans imposing their like very personal interpretations?
I mean, largely yes. Well, so it's just that the other side is that it's like if you're like anti-rebuild, that sort of codes as like pro otaku pride, pro like hashtag not normal. I'm like I'm a true. I really get it. Like I'm the intellectual. And I just want to say, like, I could not give less of a shit about this, like, particular divide. I just find, like, the original to be, like, superior artwork. and I did not like what I saw of the rebuild, so I stopped watching.
Yeah, I feel like these types of, you're gonna, that's a dog chasing its tail, because you're not even critiquing art anymore. Now you're critiquing people's interpretation of the art interpreting itself. Oh my God.
Yeah, you're right. It endlessly, it's an Ouroboros of arguments.
Yes.
But I mean, I just thought it was funny.
Evangelion,
I did see that develop in the discussion.
Yeah. I feel like, what's interesting about that, actually? This is something I thought about specifically with anime, which is that anime, because video games, for example, why I think about, like, it's so much easier to engage with video games than anime sometimes, is because video games have a very active community of creators, in the sense that people who listen to video game critique, like a lot of people who message me say, your critique is like literally helping me design my game. It's literally helping me, like, in this very hands-on way of, because if you're designing a game, if you're making a game, you have to have an aesthetic value set. You have to have it.
Whether
There's no way around
it or not, it's there.
Whether it has to exist. Not only does it have to exist, you often have to, like, start to make a lot of decisions, thousands and thousands of decisions based off of that art, that value set aesthetically, right? The thing that's interesting is, like, and I wonder if it would be, I just don't know much about the anime world, but is this I don't know if this, like, exists in the world of anime, because anime, like, do people who are, like, really into anime and stuff, do they have aspirations to create anime and, like, to create works of art?
Honestly, I think that's probably a much smaller subset. Like, you got, like, the, I don't know what you call it, like the art people that are, like, on Twitter making their art stuff. I would argue that, like, it's a much smaller probably percentage of the fandom that have, like, true professional aspirations to, like, break. First of all, anime is Japanese, right? Are you going to go to Japan and, like, work in the, I mean, that's like kind of a tall order. I know some people that want to do that, but it's tough to do.
Yeah, that's why I wonder if it would be a little bit as a, like, a Western fan base, if there was like this, like, Western animation counterpart, because that exists in games, right? There's Japanese games, but there's Western games too. And like myself, I love Japanese arcade games and think their design values are really important. And part of what I do is, like, these design values we can learn from and we can apply to our own games to improve our own games.
Right.
And I almost wonder if the anime world would benefit if it had a sort of like, creative outlet for these types of considerations, because the thing about I think what is happening is, like, you have like I'm saying, like, I have a very aesthetic fondness for Evangelion, and so if I always think about this as a writer, like, when I finally get down to writing something, I would think about, like, what is my value set, how does this affect my style, my tone, what my aesthetic, my voice, all these types of things. And so that's where I think critique, analysis, discussion really starts to become a lot more tangible. And I always wonder if a lot of these sort of, like, weird cultural impositions over art is because there's nowhere to put this energy, right? Like, where do you put the energy of, I prefer the rebuild over I prefer the original series? Like,
message boards.
If you can't, right, like, if you can't express that energy creatively yourself into writing, into art of some kind, I think that's why you see these types of things developing.
Well, that's an
because
interesting thought.
There's no outlet for, like, this amount of passion, right? It's like you have so much fucking passion for the original series and nowhere to put it. Because if you're not expending it creatively, where does it go? You know, it just starts to spin in your head. And then I think that's how you get, like, these weird, like, perf battles in artistic communities and, like, fan communities, is because there's nowhere for that energy to go. So it starts to just fight. It just fires at the other people in the community because you don't have because for example, like, let's say that we're art studios, we're anime studios, right? Like, I'm the Electric Underground anime studio, and then there's another anime studio that's, like, Rebuild, right?
Yeah.
And so they're watching the rebuilds and they're like, okay, this is it. This is Evangelion. These are the influences we're taking from Evangelion. And they're making their own animes, like, influenced by the values of Rebuild. So their animes are all about, like, being a good person and getting a job, and that's fine. Which is fine if that's your thing. But then my studio would be like, let's, we were looking for that, like, fucked up, uncomfortable, kind of, like, depressed, intense vibe. That's what we're going for here. And that's the influence we're pulling from Evangelion. We want that aesthetic. We want that feel.
Sure.
Like, for example, like a little microcosm of that is I made a video about Nintendo, and I wanted to explain kind of like the darker, kind of like grungier elements of Nintendo. Nintendo ended with Iwata. And so I was like, how do I evoke this? How do I evoke this feeling of like grunginess with Nintendo, which is historically, like Disney-ish, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, end of Evangelion. Evangelion's aesthetic. It's feel like.
Sure.
And so the thumbnail, I'm really Bog made it, and I love the way he pulled it together. But I was like, the concept is like we want to evoke that like dark apocalyptic feel. End of Evangelion invokes that. So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Oh boy, it's just what a fucked up situation. The media landscape we're in right now. It is somewhat black-pilling that like not much of this is likely to change anytime soon. I mean, look, everybody recognizes that we're like suffering from real fucking remake syndrome right now, and
big time.
Even those people
Big
that defend
time.
individual instances recognize that, like, Jesus Christ, like they're making another, like, I don't know, new Star Wars movie or whatever. Some people like it, I don't know. I know some of those people.
What's interesting is it's becoming that's reinforcing itself in a really in a weird way, because it's not just about. That's why I'm saying like these big macro concepts. I mean, of course those play a part, but another thing too is that actually the habit of ingesting media is shifting along with this practice. So now, a lot of people are not like even learning the idea or the concept of like seeking out new original things, because it used to be
wait for a rebuild of it to come out and you'll watch it then.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it used to be if you wanted to get something unique and different, you'd have to like seek it, and then you'd have to enter something new that you weren't familiar with. And it is actually like because I remember when I was in my 20s, I was really into like post rock and into like that kind of music, Swans,
sure,
Godspeed You Black Emperor and stuff. And so, but I had no familiarity with the genre or anything, so I had to like actively seek it. And and that was the most time I remember in my music ingesting lifespan, like actively hunting, like where, and like tracing connections between bands, tracing like influences, and like uncovering this entire world of a genre that I hadn't experienced before. And that is something that I feel like, I'm maybe projecting here, that anime fans used to do. They used to be like that, where you like hunt around and be like, okay, find this and then find that, and then like you like build up your aesthetic value set of what you think good anime is.
You know what it was for me? The time in my life I went and explored the most music was when I was reading through JoJo for the first time, and I wanted to listen to all the albums that were referenced by the stand
that's
names.
really cool.
And so I went and listened to like a bunch of Prince and a bunch of all kinds of other stuff. So that was but you're right. And you know what? Let me make a video game comparison. Okay, we're all gamers here. We can all relate to this. It's like when you get to a boss in a game, and you think, okay, you fought the boss once and you lost, and you now have two options. You could go, like, you could grind, theoretically. You could, like, learn the mechanics of the game better. Maybe it's a game, in fact, let's say it's a game where there is no grinding, but you could learn the mechanics better to get better at the game. But also, you notice in the menu, you could just switch from normal mode to easy mode.
Which you can do now.
And which of those, I ask you, is like sort of better to train your muscles of like overcoming challenges and like bettering yourself?
Yeah.
And, it's just a video game. It's not that serious, but like it's that kind of thing. And like taking the easy path each time does sort of condition one to be lazy about stuff. So like, maybe it's good to have to look at things. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot, because video game difficulty is a very tangible form of what I would call like a literacy check.
Sure.
Like getting good. And certain games, like for example, everyone brings up Souls. And I think the reason why Souls is brought up so much is because Souls sort of pushed a lot of people's literacy that they hadn't before. And so then that becomes a very foundational work to them, because it's pushing a literacy that they didn't have.
Sure.
And difficulty in games is like amazing because it's such a clear form of literacy. It's like, can you beat it? Can you not?
Right.
But I've thought a lot about this because I've been explaining difficulty in games and like its importance and all that. And I thought, maybe we have underestimated literacy in other forms of media consumption, because obviously there's literacy in terms of reading, right? If you can't understand the words, you can't access the work. But I do think that it does exist in visual mediums as well. Like your literacy to be able to understand image subtext and the way that visual communication works. I think there is a literacy there. And I think part of engaging new original works builds up that literacy, because I think one thing about remakes and why people find them very comfortable and very familiar is because the visual language of the medium or the property, or the storytelling language, right? So who is Shinji, who is Misato, these, so you don't need to do the mental work of learning the characters, understanding the characters, connecting with the characters. That's already built in. So then you can bypass that whole step and just go directly into, okay, what's today's scenario, a sitcom. Whereas I think if there were less remakes coming out and there was more original work coming out, that muscle would get trained more.
Sure.
And it would feed itself harder. I think that's one reason why the remake thing, both in games but also just in general media, keeps getting more and more accelerated, is because it's feeding itself.
I agree. Yes.
Where you don't have to relearn, you don't have to connect with things. You already have that built in, established for you.
The industries themselves, they're not really going to be the things that put a check on this personally, because a new property for them is great, new jobs, new project, everyone working in the great, we can new script, it's any new content that they can make is good for them, so they're going to want to make it in Hollywood or game studios or whatever. This needs to be sort of an outside value system applied on the decision about what to make, what to direct your energy into. So it's not just going to be pure market forces by itself. It is sort of a value system that has to be thought of. And by the way, on the subject of media literacy here, that's a big buzzword that people throw around about this stuff. But I just find it interesting when it comes to remake culture and stuff. The media literacy crowd that are so quick to say that you don't understand the work. If you blah 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 don't agree with me on this perception or whatever it is, they really clam the fuck up quickly when you're okay, but this remake defies the things I connected with in the story in XYZ reason. All of a sudden it's just let people have fun. That yes. becomes the reasoning very quickly. Yeah.
But I feel the way I feel, because I'm not trying to battle the internet, because the internet would destroy me if I tried to battle them.
Very true.
But I always think whenever I have these discussions with other people that I would consider more critically minded, I feel that's what's it called? Tapping out, in wrestling.
Yeah,
if you get to the point where you're well, just enjoy it, don't think about it, you're boom, that's a tap out.
Yeah, it's a concession, I think. It's an admittance that you certainly aren't engaging with the conversation that's attempted to be had by somebody like me, who's just let me say, for example, on the new thing, there was a clip of the rebuilds and the ending and sort of the tweet that people were passing around that were yelling at me about was I said something like damn, this sure looks worse than real Evangelion, lol, something like that. And in all kinds of ways. So I did not elaborate in what ways I thought it looked worse. But that was my point. This looks worse. And by the way, it looks worse in terms of character design. It looks worse in terms of the gloss and sheen on the characters. The aesthetics of End of Evangelion.
I've noticed that's a real thing now. Everything's so shiny.
Yeah, right. And just aesthetically, I like it worse. So I didn't elaborate on that. But then I got a lot of people, call me stupid or whatever, and then I don't get it. That's fine. Incel coded, blah, 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 whatever. That's fine. But it's just I did not get a lot of argument as to why this looks better than End of Evangelion, which was my main point. And to be totally fair, there were other things that I talked about too in other tweets. So people weren't being totally unfair to respond to other points or ask for clarification. It's just but where was the argument saying, no, this does look better than End of Evangelion? To me, it was non-existent. I did not see it.
Yeah, so and what's interesting is that in gaming, because there's fidelity and there's all of that.
Yeah.
Gaming has a much easier time getting around this argument, but I think it's really interesting in anime because anime of that era, like end of Evangelion, is amazing aesthetically.
It sure is.
It's so amazing. So you can't do the sort of gaming thing of like, well,
new graphics,
it's higher
better resolution,
new graphics. Yeah, in anime you can't do that.
No, you
so
cannot.
it's like,
no, you can't.
make it shinier. Like,
that
what can you do?
Seems to be their move.
Yeah. When in doubt, make it shinier because shiny is new.
Shiny
so therefore,
is new is good.
Because it's really
Old
shiny.
is bad. Well, here, let me make. I've kind of got this one last kind of point I want to make about like sort of our like modern expression. Speaking of like, it's a new era, and like we've got new values like make it shiny or whatever. So like, I've got a thought about shiny. Sort of it's a new era, and like we've got a new idea to express. Sort of like Anno did with like the rebuilds. Get a job, be a happy normal person. Okay, I mean that's fine. I generally agree with that. That's just not the point of the original, which is way more interesting.
But it's such a generic thing to say. You can turn on the Disney
Channel. Doesn't mean bad. It could be good, but does it match up to the original? No, it does not. Thing, though.
Yeah, if the original series didn't exist,
yeah,
it's just does not exist, and Rebuild is the only series, sure, on its own. But then, would it be iconic? Would people really think it's like really special?
I'd have to watch it. Look, maybe these are like the best movies ever. Again, I have not watched the last two, so I really can't judge the specifics. But
I think they would be. I think they would be like good, but they wouldn't be iconic. I wouldn't be making end of Evangelion thumbnails.
It's so hard to say because it's like a meta product. It can't exist without the original. So
yes, I know
it's hard
so
to.
Interesting.
It's hard
so
to grapple
interesting.
with. Okay, so let me just say this. So I just wrote like a little thing here about my thoughts on like the concept of art and the way it's expressed in any given modern age in which it's being made. So I want to say that like, so it's true to a large extent that art expresses the ethos of the time in which it's made. It captures the zeitgeist or something. I heard this like one interview with Rick Rubin, the famous music producer who produced like everyone's favorite music ever.
Yeah, he's great.
And I've referenced this a few times, but this really stuck with me, that he made this general argument that like one way to view art, like you could view it from like the great man of history. Anno was such a genius, he made the best thing ever. But there's another way to view art production, or maybe a competing theory, which is that like a cultural zeitgeist will almost inevitably produce sort of by itself via the organism of mankind, like a collective idea that has come into the public consciousness. And so as opposed to there being,
really cool.
I mean, I think it's fascinating. As opposed to there being like Isaac Newton hit on the head by an apple, realizes gravity is real. It's that like someone was gonna realize gravity was real eventually, and it happened to be like it. I don't think that is true, and that there's no like great artistic men of history. I think that there's like a balancing act, but I definitely think there are like cultural ideas that blossom or bloom through someone. Yeah.
You know what's interesting? You bring that up because it's so applicable to Evangelion, because that era, end of Evangelion era, if you look at other works, not just anime, other works during that era, that was a very prevalent aesthetic.
Dude, there's a bunch of series that are actually quite similar to Evangelion, like Razafon or whatever it's called. There's a bunch of ones like Ideon, I think, is kind of similar. That's a little older, but
so you could say I do think there's something to be said about like an era producing a sort of unconscious aesthetic that people are experiencing, and then so that's half of it, but then the other half is who pulls it into a form.
Correct.
And those two together create that like perfect synergy. It's like, because I think the Matrix is like this too, right?
Yeah,
like,
great point.
The Matrix, there was a lot of thought about that topic at that time.
Yes.
And that aesthetic was like kind of around. And then
they were famously inspired by Ghost in the Shell, which had like
Ghost in the
consciousness
Shell.
online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And all of that kind of comes together, and it's like both a person and a place meeting, and that meeting will never happen again. And I do think that makes sense in terms of Evangelion and Anno, because like his time, and like that time connected together and created that particular expression, and now he's like out of time, so now he's like stuck in this
he's
his
got
own
new values,
personal
new
time.
ideas.
But he does not represent this era.
Indeed.
Right, he doesn't represent this era, so now he's like it's not working like that
it feels sort of out of
together
sync. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I I get it. Like, because once you say, all right, you know much more about anime than me. This is a kind of swing here. But once you say what the rebuilds are kind of going for, once you say like Gurren Lagann is much more like effectively communicating.
Well, obviously I love Gurren Lagann, and look, it's a different story. Gurren Lagann is not telling even close to the same story as like the rebuilds of Evangelion, from my limited understanding. They're obviously totally different. So like I can't compare them, like
the vibe.
Which is better.
The vibe.
Well, again, the vibe is like totally different also. So
is it? Okay. I was swinging there. I was taking a shot.
Let me say this. So everybody loved the Evangelion, like whatever, the Rebuild 2, the second movie. And the big thing at the time was that, dude, Shinji goes full Gurren Lagann at the end of, like, Rebuild 2.
There you go.
And everyone's like, dude, it was badass. This is the, like, Shinji was a pussy. Everyone knows Shinji was a pussy. He's not a pussy anymore. By the way, I'm, like, the biggest Gurren Lagann fan in the world. I saw the scene, and I was like, I'm not interested. This is not what I signed up for. This does not feel like the Shinji I know, and it is not what I'm looking for, you know? Yeah.
Because maybe that aesthetic belonged to a different work.
It belongs to Gurren Lagann, not to Evangelion.
It belongs to Gurren Lagann, yeah. Like, that's what I was saying about, like, game design, too. It's like, sometimes, like, I love Resident Evil 4, the original.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean every game that I love needs to become Resident Evil 4.
Of course. That would be ridiculous.
So like, but that's kind of what a lot of these remake arguments kind of become. It's like, oh, parries, I love parries, so now let's put
parries in literally everything forever, yeah.
And parries in there. Resident Evil 4 remake now has parries. Resident Evil 9 is like parry central, by the way.
Yeah. So. Variety is the spice of life, folks. And like, again, I love Gurren Lagann, but I don't want every story to be Gurren Lagann. That would be stupid. That would be weird and cringe. Yeah, so
exactly.
Why even try?
And I do feel like that kind of, because remember you're saying how Yokotaro was really into,
he loved Evangelion. He's deeply influenced by Evangelion. Yeah,
he's deeply influenced by Evangelion. But isn't it better? My assertion would be, it's better that he takes that influence, he internalizes it, and then creates something that is his interpretation of Evangelion as an original IP that's influenced by Evangelion.
It's like impossible
rather than
to
literally
do.
Rather than literally taking Evangelion and like changing.
There's too many confounding variables to do this in any meaningful way, but like it would be worth comparing something like Nier Automata to whatever this Evangelion project is when it's done, and being like, which was a better story, and I like other people are involved, it's not just him, like you can't so actually compare like it. Therefore, I know that doing this project was a mistake. Like, you can't, it's hard. But now, if it sucks, I definitely will be like, well, there you go. I mean, guess you shouldn't have done that. But, you know, you've got to give the guy some charity. All these things are like, for the record, I mean, let me say, for example, Tetsuya Nomura, Kingdom Hearts guy, like, he came up with, like, Neo Twoei and stuff, or, like, Twoei, The World Ends With You and all that stuff. He did a lot of good stuff. But in Neo Twoei, he was like barely involved. I think that even though Nomura gets all the credit for like Twoei as a series and whatnot, I kind of think the special sauce is actually not Nomura. I think he was the idea guy at the basis. I think it's the team that made the game like be as good as it is based on how Neo Twoei came out. So similarly, it's entirely possible that these other projects, no matter who the director is, the producer, the studio that's making it, we'll never know. Just like in Kingdom Hearts 3, the like combat developer guy that they brought in later with the DLC to fix the combat and like make it better, like, and like they made the DLC with all the best boss fights and stuff. Like, that's the guy that you can contribute the combat being good to, not like just Nomura or whatever. It's a complex thing. So anyway, just saying. I understand it's like complicated to figure out when a piece of media is good or bad, who's to blame for it. You can also look at like Kojima, like does Kojima deserve the credit even though the games kind of got convoluted and stupid after that one writer left after Metal Gear 3, or Metal Gear Solid 3. So a very long discussion to have there, but let me go back for a second to my point about art being a product of its time and just, you know, like bearing fruit in a particular thing, capturing the spirit of the age. So like, what's going on? Why is it like this now? Why do we have like a million stories about like multiverses and stuff? Well, we've had like comic books forever. We are living in the remake era. We're living in like the online digital era where everybody's got a different opinion about the exact same event and we're all kind of siloed. So like in this,
I do think that is yes, I think you're onto something here.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm just saying, like, that is the world that we live in. So, like, is it even at all surprising that, like, our media blossoms into stories that, like, attempt to rationalize this existence in which they live of, like, you know, all realities are like separate and we're trying to compete with them and trying to rationalize them in our heads. And like Anno lives with Evangelion split into different continuities and seems like he's like trying to unify them. Of course, ironically, then he continues it after he's gone. So like now we're kind of splitting it again. But go figure, man. That's his prerogative. But so like personally, my value I project onto this, right? As we talk about all this stuff is that like I am tired of remake culture, and I'm tired of being caught in the tangle of your franchises, and I want to pull a Dr. Manhattan and like eject myself from all this tedium and this, you know, the mashing of stories and pushing them together and twisting them and stuff. And look, I live in reality. I'm a human. I'm not Dr. Manhattan. I can't escape to micro universe or whatever. But like, this is the complaint. It's not that I think Yoko Tara's Eva will be shit. It's destined to be shit. I cannot know that. I won't pretend otherwise. But the ethos, the spirit behind it, I am weary of. I'm tired, boss, is the point I'm making ultimately. And, you know, I think many people can relate to that feeling. Do you agree, Mark?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I've kind of resigned myself, like I said, to the idea that the best we can do in terms of criticizing these things is to just be clear about what we value aesthetically, what we think is coherent and engaging, and what influences us artistically. Because I think if you're thinking about like how things are going to go, we're just going to watch this happen. It's going to happen. There's no, it's not going to stop. No one's stopping it. This is going to be it. Yep. So all we can do is like document it.
I think it'll keep going until the economy absolutely collapses. Honestly, I think that is what you need a reset point, because humans are not good at stopping themselves when they're in the middle of bad behavior. I think it has to be an economic collapse is the actual only thing that'll, and like those lots of companies will like explode and never exist again. And I'm not hoping for that. I don't want that. That'll be sad. But like one of the silver linings will be like maybe an economic reset to like this miasma that we all can feel around us. So, you know,
what I'm hoping to see happen, because as glorious as that, I think that would be awesome.
It could be glorious.
If it was really as like awesomely clear as that, like every studio is just like, we have failed, remakes have failed us, that would be amazing. But I think
I think this would involve a lot of people dying of starvation and stuff. I don't want that. I'm just saying it would make sense if that.
I think what will happen, and it will be less exciting but more subtle, is that this. So like if you think about this as like a curve, right? What's going to happen is this remake stuff, it's not going to explode, which would be great. Yeah. But what's going to do is it's going to slowly start to decline year by year.
That's already happening.
Yes, it's going to slowly decline, and it's going to be boring and slow, unfortunately. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be a small, at first, a small upswing of originality, but it's going to start small. It's not going to be you wake up tomorrow and everything's original amazing. It's going to be this slow build of small original IPs. Like maybe, like I said, there's like some studio out there that was like influenced by Evangelion's spirit, not its IP, its spirit, and then creates their own original work that's then establishing its own identity. And then other people are like, well, we want to do something similar. And then you'll see sort of an upward arc of original stuff as the remake stuff declines. And you see them sort of, hopefully eventually, the original stuff will climb over the top of the remake stuff.
Right.
But you might see, this might be, because we're in an era now where this might be just like, the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah,
this may just be.
It's this until trend. Doomsday.
Yeah, this might be literally a trend that goes on forever, and it's just like a roller coaster where it goes up and down, because then what could happen is those new original IPs that we're seeing emerging. What happens is those start to stall out, and then they start to do remakes.
I know, yeah,
and then and then the cycle might be.
I feel like that's where we are.
The
currently.
Beginning of a cycle. Yeah, I think that's. And this might be an endless cycle. That might just be how it is now.
I kind of think that may well be the case. But let me just return to one final point about this, because like again, I cannot judge a specific project before it's done. I can only make estimates. We all have to do that. But like to say that like, well, don't make estimates. Leave it until it comes out, then judge it. Well, then we have literally no mechanism with which to judge a property before we actually consume the entire. Guys, maybe the last 10 seconds recontextualizes everything in the entire movie, like in what's that movie with Dustin Hoffman at the very end? You know, the one where the look is like, oh God, did we fuck up horribly? Mrs. Robinson.
The Graduate?
Whatever it's called.
The
Graduate, yes.
Graduate.
Thank you. The famous example there, even though they actually just, like, they didn't plan that. They just did that during it, and it made it, like, artistically beautiful. So it totally works. But, like, what matters more than all, like, just for example, take something like Scarface, right? Like, the original Scarface from, like, the 40s or whatever, I never saw. I understand it to be pretty good, but I do deeply love the, like, 80s Scarface with Tony Montana from Cuba and stuff.
Yes.
So like that's a remake, sort of. It's rewritten. It's obviously recontextualized and stuff. I just saw like a Dracula retelling of a story that was quite good. It wasn't exactly the same. Now, do I think that all of these things shouldn't exist? No, not really. Though I would always question, like, should we be doing this?
Open.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about this too. This opens. There's another door that's interesting to discuss, which is like the role of copyright in all of this.
Sure.
Because, for example, why is it like viscerally less weird to have like a Dracula or to have a new adaptation of like some classic literary novel or something?
Yeah, it feels
or
less
a Shakespeare
weird.
play or a Shakespeare play. And I think it's because they have no copyright, they have no author, they have passed into what's it like the death of the writer era.
Yeah, whatever that's called.
Yeah. Whereas Evangelion has a copyright,
right?
It has an author, and so it's too young. For like that's the thing.
I mean,
it's
complicated.
Because Shakespeare.
Stuff.
Because for example,
yeah,
you could make 5,000 shitty versions of Romeo and Juliet, which probably exist.
Probably.
But Shakespeare's original is so embedded into our cultural foundation. It's so solid. It's like a diamond. It's so solid. You can't crack it. You can't break it.
Everybody knows.
It's so established.
Everybody knows that there's a real core version of the story, which is just what Shakespeare wrote. Now, what's funny about that is that it's a play meant to be performed by different actors each time. So, like, in that one example of, like, a play like Shakespeare, all of Shakespeare's work, then the different expressions of it are only natural. But that's why everybody would cite the original writing as, like, okay, that is what the story truly is. There's Romeo and Juliet
canon.
is not the true updated canon of Romeo and Juliet. So it's not even part of the extended universe. It just isn't the original. It's one iteration. It is one flowering of the plant, of the base root that is the story. But let's take something.
I think
go ahead.
I've thought about this as a rule as a critic, and I think it's kind of helpful. Is like, for example, with the new Evangelion that's coming out, the new whatever remake or whatever,
Tarogelion, whatever.
That. If what you have to say about it is relevant to how it's interpreted, relevant to how it's talked about, which it would be because it's of its time, then that's just, there's still that vulnerability of the artwork. Whereas if you have a work of art that has passed into canon, that has passed into cultural foundational status, which I don't know if any anime has. I don't know what
Cowboy Bebop? I mean, they tried to make a live action remake. I don't know.
I think it's too young of a medium, but
yeah, sure. I agree.
But once you enter like cultural foundational works, then derivative works become not a comment on Shakespeare. They become just a way of expressing your particular whatever view or whatever. Because the original is so foundationally settled in. But with new works, especially, I mean, come on, anything in the 19th century, 2000s, all that, it's too fresh to enter into that foundational status.
Sure.
And so if you start reinterpreting it and doing different things with it, it does change its nature.
You are shaping the public understanding of the property,
yes,
sure.
You are shaping the public understanding of it, exactly. Whereas, like, you're taught Shakespeare in school. You're not taught Evangelion in school. If you went to school and they slapped Evangelion on your desk and they're like, this is the canonical version of Evangelion.
I mean, they probably do in animation school, honestly.
That would be cool if they did that, actually. I actually think art schools should do that, by the way. Like, art schools should establish like their canon of what art is in that school, so that like their tradition.
Yeah, sure.
But anyway,
makes sense.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of another factor that's really interesting. And also the copyright thing. Like, no one owns Dracula.
Right.
Dracula is public domain. So it is much more, because, for example, Yoko Taro is a super fan of Evangelion.
Right.
Why is he allowed to do it? Why can't me?
The investors
Why can't
agreed. That's why.
Because someone owns that copyright.
Right.
So I can't make my interpretation of Evangelion and like kickstart it and start a studio and, hey guys, we're making the continuation of Evangelion, because the copyright is actually held by someone. Whereas I could do that with Dracula or whatever. If I wanted to burn money, I could do it. And so I think copyright plays a part in this too.
Like, this is why, like, I don't have any problem with like fan art. Obviously, why would I? It sounds silly even to say, but it's because no one looks to fan art. Actually, this actually does happen a little bit. People will like for example, they'll draw like characters with like way huger tits in fan art, and people will start to be like, why is the original like look so different? What's going on? But like the general point is just like, nobody looks at fan art and is like particularly confused immediately as to like, oh, this is like the true source of the story. It's super easy to delineate. It does not confuse the active mind as to like which is the real version of the story. I mean, there's a more complicated like cultural conversation you could have if it's affecting it at all. But like, I'm okay with fan art, obviously, but I have problems about official designated works that are said to be like a continuation, an extension, et cetera, et cetera.
That's what I'm saying. It's corporate fan art. Right. What's the difference between the guy drawing giant tits on whatever character and then a corporation buying the IP and then being like, boom, now she has giant tits? The difference is that the copyright implies some sort of artistic authorship over the work. And people, as much as you will say it online or whatever, and people be like, yeah, I agree. But like instinctually, people still feel that way.
People say all the time that like it's about morality, not laws. But I forget, this is like some Greek teacher or whatever, but it's like, no, the law is a teacher. People appeal to it all the time as like a moral arbiter of, that's just human nature to do that. They look for authority to justify their opinion about stuff. So like it does in fact matter. It does convince people.
Yes. So if you are the copyright holder of a work and then you reinterpret the work, it has some kind of built-in authority.
Yes.
Whether or not I don't personally respect that authority. Yeah. But to the public consciousness of that work, it does.
Absolutely.
And so that's another difference there, is that if the argument is shatter Evangelion's copyright and let everyone make Evangelion reinterpretations, I think that would be more interesting, honestly, than, oh, this corporation bought the copyright and now they're going to find who they think would do a good spin-off of it.
It certainly would it would allow people to use the excuse that like, okay, none of this is like canon, which they could easily say, or say all of it, which kind of means none of it is canon because it's just too much to keep track of.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, before it's
that weird middle point where it's not free enough to like decanonize everything,
right? But
it's not the author's singular vision either. It's like this weird in between that's just awkward. That's just a compromise.
And you know, I always appeal to this when it comes to like this discussion of stuff, but it's like when it comes to like the authenticity of a work and like deciding whether its identity has been settled and whatnot, especially if like the author themselves or the creator decides to change it or modify it or whatever. The famous example is like George Lucas tweaking stuff in like his original, you know, the prequels or the original movies rather. Han shot first, et cetera, et cetera. And like I always appeal to the one famous, like Plinkett did it in his video a million years ago, but it's the people versus George Lucas and that one dude saying the thing I think is absolutely true, which is like art is not finished, it is abandoned and then shown, and it is that version that connects with people, and to tweak it after that point is arguably like immoral or not fair or unkind or like it shouldn't be recognized as true. So and it just having a stamp legally copyright owner, like that's a simple dismiss. We can dismiss that argument. That's not enough. It's way deeper than just saying that you have the authority to do so. It's about the values and about what you get out of the series and all that stuff. So that's all very relevant. Yeah,
because art is a conversation.
Indeed,
it is an expression and receive. You know, you express the art and then it's received. And it's like if you're in the middle of an argument and you say some nasty stuff to someone and then the next morning you're like, okay, forget all of that. What I was saying was this. It's like, that's, I mean, you can attempt this.
You can attempt.
But
Yeah,
you can't,
you can attempt.
You cannot undo that initial like receiving process. It can be forgiven, but it can't be unless, you know, eternal sunshine and spotless mind or something.
Right. Even
but
then, it didn't totally work. It didn't totally work in that either.
Right.
But that's like me trying to forget like specific Star Trek lore or, you know, things that I unfortunately know that I wish I didn't know so I can engage with the property the way I used to be able to.
Yes, exactly.
But ultimately this comes down to, and I'll cite one more Star Trek example here. It's just like, so there's this ongoing discussion about like Star Trek, you know, it's like sucks now and they're not telling the story right. So we had a glimmer of hope in this thing that you'll hear much more about this in the upcoming Star Trek 101 Twig lecture. But this guy, Terry Matalas. So Star Trek Picard did so bad that they brought on this guy, Terry Matalas, and they were like, look, he had been working on the first 2 seasons, but they were like, look, this is going like shit. People hate our show. Terry, you're like the nerd that like cares more about the lore than any of us. Just take over season 3. We already committed to making it. Go for it. Do whatever you want. And Terry was like, oh baby, we're in. And Terry, in season 3 of Picard specifically, did the best that he could and made a pretty decent season. I still have critiques of it. It's not perfect. But he made like as good as you could do given the baggage he was saddled with, kind of. And it was like, holy shit, you like actually could kind of tell a good Star Trek story if you really put your mind to it, that doesn't like fuck over every character or kill everyone that we love or contradict the values of Starfleet. Like, he brought back some of that old spirit, and there was talk about him doing a sequel series, Star Trek Legacy, which just did not happen because he got like bought up by like another company, Marvel or something, or DC, whatever, with Netflix. I don't know.
Yeah.
So like it didn't happen, even though there was hope for it. Probably because Star Trek Picard, it had just suffered so much damage in the meantime that like it was too little too late. But there was actually hope there. So like, as always, it can be done. If the right, I always say Diebuster. Gunbuster was in the 80s. Diebuster came out like 2000 whatever. And like, it really did not need to exist, but it was fantastic. You know, Anno made Diebuster, and then Tsurumaki made Diebuster a decade and a half later, 2 decades later, whatever it was. And it like fucking ruled and is like arguably better than Gunbuster, in my opinion. So what really matters, this is why it all comes back to like, I personally need to be put in charge of deciding which continues are, which continuities are allowed, which iterations, which sequels need to be made, and which ones are shit and suck and don't need to be made, because I fully grant that there are good ones. It is possible. It just so often isn't good that it requires a much higher level of scrutiny than we're currently given this whole process. So that's where we come back to. We talked about it years ago, like the Nate you know, council of deciding what should and shouldn't be allowed. You get like 5 years to make your shit, then it's done. You can't make any more. You can appeal to me for special permission to do so, whatever it was. Because ultimately they'll just follow the profit motive and make some stupid slop. If that's all there is to it, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that even if you get into these kind of interesting intellectual, like artistic cases, right? Because there's definitely intellectual cases of this happening, especially because the art that ironically would probably benefit the most from remakes is art that isn't that good in the first place.
Sort of, yeah.
So that way, you know, like you're salvaging something.
Or stories that always needed an ending and never got one, as long as it's done in the right way. Like Twin Peaks. I never finished it, but season 3 of Twin Peaks is one example. It was made like 27 years later, which actually totally worked for the canonicity of the established story. So it was like beautiful, is my understanding. I got to finish it.
And Lynch did do that, right? It wasn't some other.
Everybody loved it. Everybody, Lynch himself did it. So it totally worked. As far as I'm aware.
I always think it really helps to have the original dude involved. If you're going to do it, getting them involved helps a lot.
No doubt.
Because there, you know, there's still some hope there.
It doesn't solve every problem. Right. Final Fantasy VII Remake people, but it does go a ways.
Yeah, and I think what I was saying is that, like you said, a lot of this stuff though, like the conversations happening aren't these really complex artistic considerations of should we continue the series for these artistic purposes almost ever. It's like, we need this to exist as a product. how do we justify it? Like that's almost always
that
the
seems
conversation.
To be it, yeah.
Like,
I mean, like,
okay, we begin.
There's a layer of the creator. I'm like, there's probably some people on the team that are concerned, but the higher level serious conversation as to whether it actually gets made seems to always be economic, marketing team, that kind of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these projects that could be remade and like really improved are stuff that people wouldn't give a shit about because they weren't good to begin with. Sure. So people aren't like, getting all hyped about some crappy anime that came out that wasn't good, and the original artist is like, hey man, I really could improve this.
Yeah.
And
I can think of there were some canceled Shonen Jump series that like I always wanted. There's one called Double Arts. It just ran for like, I don't know, it was like 20, 30 chapters in Shonen Jump like, I don't know, a decade ago or something. Like someone finish that story, please. I was really enjoying it. And then it just got canceled because it wasn't popular enough. That kind of thing.
Yeah, there's some of those too where I was watching some random Netflix show. It wasn't that great, but it was like good enough to be kind of interested, and then it gets canceled. You're like, well,
yep.
There's no way that 10 years from now they're gonna be like, remember that random shitty Netflix show that got canceled? We're remaking that. That's not gonna happen.
No, it's not. So look, we're kind of stuck with the world that we're in right now. You give me you make me feel better about this, Mark, that like what we can do is be critical, is be critics, doing our job as best we can. This is the role that we're playing here. And yeah, you're doing it steadily, I do it every once in a while when I release a fucking video, but it is meaningful. I think it is useful, and we're just part of a larger conversation going on in the media landscape. And there is fatigue with this stuff, obviously, and a lot of people want it to change,
especially with remakes, because you'll notice. I remember like when the first batch of like real big remakes were coming out. Yeah, I remember there being a lot more critical voices during that era.
People have gotten used to it now, I think.
Yeah, people have gotten used to it, and also on the critic side, and I'm sure you feel this, like what we're doing is not a good like economic career path. Like if you're trying to establish yourself as a recognizable name in media discussion, it is so much more strong in terms of career prospects to be like to like line yourself up basically.
The number one thing to do is do the access journalism angle and be a sycophant and be like a cheerleader for and the thing is, you don't even need to lie. You can just like selectively voice your positive feelings about a thing, and they'll pay you to do it. So, yeah, and
it's not even just. It would be actually really nice if the only issue was like people just like literally getting paid. That does happen. Yeah, but I think even more so, even if you take away like direct payments and stuff. Yeah, in terms of because of what Blader said about it being a social thing that people. Yes. So like
people love the cheerleaders. It makes them feel good.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you imagine the remake releases as like a party, we are the douches in the corner and be like, actually, it's not responsible to drink like that. Actually, you should be.
I have a term for this. I have a term for this. Hype culture. This is hype culture at work. People get excited. They want to discuss. And if you're coming in pouring water by saying like, this doesn't need to exist. This conflicts with their you're pooing on their party. You're fucking them over. Yeah. So, and they don't like that, kind of understandably. And it's especially true if they just don't take the art that seriously. Yeah, if they just aren't that concerned about this sort of, not to suck my own dick too hard, but like this more intellectual way of looking at it that's like, okay, what's like our long-term... look, it's easy to just say like, in the self-filleting way is to be like, if you just have a personal connection to something and it's just parochial to you that you think that like this one little project is like the best thing ever and the remake fucked it up horribly, you're like, well, that sucks, and I'm gonna tell people about it. So like, yes, a lot of us feel that way about a lot of things that are happening, a lot of continuations, and I just would like that to stop.
And that's why I wanted to point out like the temperament part, because it's funny, personality wise, as a person, I'm all about it. So if something came out and I actually respected it, I would be dancing and being social and having a fun time. Sure. It's just this, like I said, it's like something you can't help, but you're like, I don't like this though. Yeah. That's the problem. And it's like, and I think you're right. Like what ends up happening is that over time you just become more selective because you want to participate. Sure. You want people to like you. You want to have friends. So you just start to like, maybe I won't be, too outspoken about it. I'll be like,
These are subtle pressures.
And then also, I feel like there are certain people temperament-wise that really enjoy the process of taking something that isn't very good and like kind of trying to lift it, like rhetorically, like lift this shit up with some real, because that is an intellectual exercise of its own. Like, how do I intellectually bolster this piece of shit? And I like, you're, and it is a sort of like reverse role of critique. It's like you lift things and and I think you do both, but it's just like, it's about how you honestly feel.
Not
so if I honestly,
oh, sorry,
go
on.
Oh yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like, like random ass arcade games no one loves. I personally feel that passion for them, so I get all hyped and I'll be like, yeah. But the thing is, there's no like powerful market behind these poor little games being like, boom, I see a career ahead of you, boy. You're really, you're really helping our games, because they're like these little, niche things.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the funny part is like, in terms of being a critic, I feel like, especially over time, I've noticed your taste becomes like more refined, more critical the longer you do it.
Yeah.
You don't get like less critical.
You're
so ironically,
those muscles for sure.
yeah. So it builds up longer and longer and longer. So I feel like it's if you're entering the party for the first time, like you just walk in and everyone's like, oh, like if you don't know anything about Evangelion, for example, you've never watched it, you don't really care about it, and then you just you're like looking at the party and everyone's having fun, and there's this one douche in the corner being like, it's not like End of Evangelion.
Yeah.
Then it's easier to walk in. Yeah, it's easier to walk in and be like, what's your problem, dude? Like, this is great.
Yep.
So, what I'm saying, what the bottom line I'm getting to is that everything is against us. We just have to hang in there.
Yeah.
We just have to white knuckle all day, every day, because that's what's going to happen.
You're right.
Everyone's going to think you're a douche. No one's going to like you. Everyone's going to think you're a pretentious asshole.
We're so magnanimous
There's no escape.
and friendly, though. How it just can't be true. I'm so handsome and approachable.
I know. What the hell?
Well, I was just gonna say, I find it interesting, just to mention it. No hatred for the guy, but like the sample of Chris Stuckman is interesting. If you know Chris Stuckman at all, that like
I know about him.
Okay, he was like a movie critic, and then like at a certain point, he was like, I kind of know people in the industry now, and I want to make movies, and I want to be a movie cheerleader. So I officially retire from being a movie critic, and I am now like a movie cheerleader guy. And I don't want to be critical because I know how hard it is to make movies. I want to cheer on the hardworking people of the industry. Okay, no disrespect to the guy. You are now just a part of the machine. That's fine.
Yeah.
You can have that role. Like, I got no hatred for the guy that works the lights on the movie set. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's what
I do know about Stuckman. And I would say, like, okay, because remember about temperaments, what I was saying?
Yeah.
So I could never do something like that because that's not how I operate.
Sure.
But if you follow Stuckman's like critique, and like his discussions,
he wants to promote movies and celebrate them. That's what he wants.
Well, and also he does want to be part of the machine. That is what
of course.
he wants.
I mean, he made his first movie.
Difference.
He's in the business now. Good for him.
Yeah, and if you see, there's like interviews with him when his movie came out. Look how happy he is. Look at the joy that he has. Like he is radiant. He is living his best life right now.
Seems that way.
He is so fucking happy. And the funny thing is that okay, he's not a critic. Okay, he's not a critic anymore.
Yep.
He's retired from that. He's moved. Well, he's an aspiring filmmaker now. That's what he is.
Right.
He wants to be, a director and stuff, which is fine. But that's not being a critic. So that's what I would say.
Right,
it's like,
and that's the thing. He is not serving the role of critiquing, refining, pushing back on any negative things in the industry. And he was clear about this. So I got no hatred for that about the guy. Just like I don't hate the guy that works the wardrobe department or the craft services for Hollywood. I mean, they're just doing their job, man. Why would I give a shit about that? That's fine. But as an art critic, you engage with the property, you engage with the series, and you say, I like this, I don't like this, you should do this differently, blah, 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 whatever. And as long as everyone's great.
I'm much more like if I was successful and like paid my way, I'd be much more like Tarantino, where I'd be like, yes, I'm gonna say what I want to say, and you're gonna listen to it. Tarantino don't give a shit, and I respect that a lot. Tarantino's like, he's got his aesthetics, he's got his values, and he doesn't give a shit if you like him or not. I think that that is a type of approach that I really respect, at least personally.
Fair enough. Well, on that note, I've pretty much said everything that I want to say. I'll just say one last time that, hey, it's about the spirit of the thing. If you're going to make a remake or whatever, I will personally judge it based on if it captures the spirit of the original, but they're not all bad, but just do it right, yes. Don't fuck it up, and we can all live in peace. Otherwise,
yeah,
I'm going to yell at
you. I would say the exact same thing. I'd give it a really nerdy term, which is the aesthetic values of the original is what I really
and I would then make one qualitative, or I guess no, a quantitative observation and say that, and for the record, this usually ends badly. It usually doesn't go great, and so based on pattern recognition, I'm suspect of things, yes. Which is why it comes back to this Eva project. Based on that, we have to analyze Yoko Taro, you know, continuing a story that like kind of has a multiple endings, seemed like it was kind of wrapping up, but Anno did say he was going to continue it. I just am suspicious of this one, but I cannot judge it individually. My critique is about the general trend and about a story that seems well told already, and to analyze the opportunity cost, if we need to continue this, what are the stories we're telling. Obviously, they think it's worth doing, whether it's for artistic reasons or for economic reasons, or just as like a project so that Yoko Taro can work in Eva, which he loves. You know, that is other considerations that you can worry about, you know, another time. So that's where I would leave it.
I have one.
Yeah,
I have one last
Mark.
question for you, Nate. This is for you. This is one final question.
Okay.
Which is, okay, we're fast forwarding 50 years from now.
Yeah.
50 years in the future. Let's just assume people even care about stuff that came out 50 years from now. Let's just assume they do. Do you think he will have his wish and Evangelion will become like this Gundam thing? Or do you think, despite his wishes, he will always be remembered for the original series and end of Evangelion, and that will be the legacy?
Second one, without question. That if you put a gun to my head, it's going. No, nothing will ever. That's the thing. Nothing will touch End of Evangelion. It is singular. It is pristine. It is a rare flower of its era. And if you want to ask my opinion about it, cramming all this crap around the sides does nothing but plant ugly flowers next to a beautiful one, and is fucking up the vibe for everybody. I would rather you just let us admire this gem and stop crowding the room with lesser beauties. That is my feeling.
I agree completely.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so hopefully it's been clear how we all feel about this, and we can all discuss in peace, and we can all be friendly and nice to each other, guys. So let's do that, shall we? All right, Mark, I'm done talking. You got anything else you want to add?
No. This was fun.
It was extremely fun. I'm very glad we did it. It was great. So hey, Mark's last video on his channel was, I'm forgetting what it was about, but it was like related to this question. What was it about?
Yes, fighting games are not products.
Exactly. Right.
It is extremely related to this topic.
I went and watched that, and I was like, we got to talk about this with me and Mark. So yeah, Mark makes great stuff.
Even poor fighting games have to battle this stuff.
I mean, that's a tough, because that's such like a product and like part of like a economic ecosystem. But yeah, anyway, go watch his video. It's great. Mark's a smart guy. He's doing it full time, so go give him money and stuff. But only after, of course, you give me money and stuff on Patreon and watch all my videos.
The order of operations. Yeah, the order of operations.
Oh, and you're talking to two past and future Twigma males that have yet unreleased Twig lectures that we will both get out in the relatively near future, hopefully, with any luck.
Yes, I promised Nate I would get it out sooner than later. So
you said within March, if I remember correctly. So now there's a deadline.
Within March, early April-ish.
Oh, now it's becoming early April.
Yeah,
interesting.
Okay. it's March 1st now. I mean, holy shit.
Yeah, get to work, buddy. Get to work. Okay, well.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Hey, they're going to be out pretty soon, though. So Twigma Mail, stand by for impact. You've got 2 lectures coming to you pretty soon. So be excited, everybody. And stay tuned for more stuff. Maybe we'll talk about like the actual like content of the Eva rebuilds sometime. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that'd be something fun to do.
That'd be fun
if we feel like it. I've got complex feelings about them actually, which we could do in like a more detailed way. But whatever, just a thought. Let us know if you're dying to see that, and if you'd give us lots of money to do so, that would be great. Okay, so thanks for watching, everybody. Go subscribe to the Electric Underground, Mark's channel. Go subscribe to my main channel, Best Guy Ever. This will be on probably Bestie Boy, my side channel, because that's just what I do now. I release the big videos on the main channel. That's the thing. So, all right, thanks for stopping by, everybody. We will see you soon, And goodbye, all of Evangelion, except the ones that come in the future and continue the story. So thanks. All right, bye, guys. Bye, Mark. Goodbye.
Bye.